I chipped in for my brother's wedding because I love him and he's always been there for me. But then my stepsister says I have to pay for her wedding. Guys, I hate this girl. Well, I'm not going to do it, and now my family is shunning me. Well, you know what? I'm just going to expose a family secret that's going to rock our entire family for decades. Life isn't always what we want it to be. Our family members are supposed to look out for us, but often they let their own selfish desires get in the way of doing the right thing. You can just call me OP. I'm in a predicament I need to get off my chest, and I could use advice I could get right now. I'm 27 and female. I never truly knew my mom. Although I've heard great things about her from family members and friends that she had, I never truly got to know a mother's love. You see, my mother passed away when I was only 2 years old. My little brother Sean was only 1 year old, and my father was certainly grief-stricken in his own way, but soon after my mother's death, he remarried the first woman who entered his life after the death of my mom. Entered the world of my horrible stepmother, Amelia. I always felt like Amelia took advantage of my father's state of vulnerability at the time, but as time has gone, I wonder if I'm just lying to myself to make my father seem better in my mind than he truly is. All I can say with absolute certainty is that if I would never treat my own child the way Amelia treated Sean, and me growing up, and if I married a man who neglected his children the way my father neglected us, I would drop the guy in a heartbeat, man. I try to be cognizant and understanding of the fact that people are flawed. But when people are aware of their flaws and continue making the same decisions that affect other people, you can't help but feel like they're only driven by self-motivation and sheer callousness. Ever since Sean and I met Amelia, she's done nothing but display the worst behavior. She's entitled, controlling, abusive, short-tempered, and she's a huge narcissist who thinks the world revolves around her. And rather than setting an example of what not to do, her daughter Reese takes from Amelia so much that you might wonder if she's simply a clone. I swear, growing up with Reese and Amelia was like watching Mini-Me and Dr. Evil in those Austin Power movies, except there was nothing funny about it. Believe it or not, my father has some good traits that he could have at least passed down to Reese. But he's been so busy working hard to just appease Reese and Amelia's every want and desire that my father seldom had time for actual parenting. Even though Reese was the youngest, she used physical force and intimidation to get her way. She was astute enough to realize at a young age that she could get just about anything she wanted because she knew that she had Amelia and my father to back her every move. At first, I could almost cut my father some slack for showing somewhat preferential treatment to Reese. Yeah, she was the newborn baby of my father and Amelia's recent union. Yet, instead of finding a way to successfully make her a part of the family, my father seemed to decide Reese was his sole family. Sean and my needs took a backseat to every single whim. I can't even begin to tell you how many times Sean and I raised these concerns to our father. He would often come home from work late at night and not even notice or care that Sean and I had bruises and welts from the being beat by both Amelia and Reese. Father simply turned a blind eye and a deaf ear to all the concerns. He could not, or perhaps would not, face the reality that he had both married and given birth to absolute nutcases. Anytime Sean or I so much as make a mistake, or speak out in turn, or do something that upset little Princess Reese, Amelia would be on our cases like a shark it's drawn to blood. She would never hesitate to berate us until we were both sobbing in shame, embarrassment, confusion, and anger. When we got older, Reese found more sinister and insidious ways to make Sean and my lives miserable, even outside of the family home. When Reese was a freshman in high school, I was a senior and Sean was a junior. Reese started a rumor that I was pregnant, and everyone believed it because I gained some weight. This wreaked havoc on my body image issue, and everybody in the entire school thought I was a total tramp as well. When I told my parents about this, Amelia and my father both just brushed it off as teenage nonsense and told me to get over it. Reese just stood there and smiled, and then there was another time when Reese started a rumor that Sean's been flirting with the cheerleaders at school, and some of the cheerleaders' boyfriends ganged up on Sean after school one day and beat him to a pulp. Reese just laughed when Sean walked in, covered in blood and bruises and a bloody eye. Amelia simply told Sean he needed to man up and learn how to fight. This resentment only got worse over the years. Reese never grew out of her toddler mentality, and she still believes the world revolves around her. She's never had to lift a finger or do anything. My father still pays all her bills, and Amelia even insisted that she be given a nice apartment. Or her own, so she can, quote, get some space from her siblings and become her own person. Geez, that would be nice if Sean and I could get such a special luxury favor done for us, but instead, Sean and I are still living at our childhood home, slaving away at chores. As such, we still have to deal with Amelia's crap and my father's impotent unwillingness to be a true man and stand up for his offspring. In fact, Sean and I have given up all hope when it comes to my father ever waking up and just seeing the putrid reality that he's manifested. He'll figure out that one day, when there's no one around to take care of him, we will just throw him in some nursing home. Well, fast forward to the present day, and the real reason I'm writing all this for you guys. You see, Reese has found her supposed soulmate. Her suitor is hardly worth talking about. I'll spare you the details and just tell you all he's a huge jerk. I could not care less that Reese is getting married. When I heard the news, my plan was to attend the wedding just to keep the peace, keep my head down and get out of there as fast as I could. Of course, nothing can ever be that easy when it comes to my family. You see, recently my beloved brother Sean found a soulmate of his own. Sean's wife is absolutely lovely. She's a great person, and I can tell she and Sean will have a wonderful, prosperous marriage. In fact, I'd say Sean might just be so lucky that he doesn't appear to be repeating the cycle of trauma. He picked out a partner who's just about the opposite of Amelia and Reese. But I digress. My point is, Sean got married recently, and I was so ecstatic about it. Since we were young, I'd always promised Sean that whenever he found the love of his life, I would happily make a hefty contribution to his wedding. I work at a social media company, so I don't make a ton of money. But I gave Sean what I could spare so he and his beloved wife could have a decent wedding. It was a low-key affair and quite beautiful and touching. Amelia and Reese did not even attend, which was fine by me. What hurt Sean and me the most was our father skipping the wedding. Giving the excuse that he would work a deadline to oversee. We were hurt by this, but I can't say that we were all too surprised. Anyways, Amelia caught wind of the fact that I'd made a hefty financial contribution to Sean's wedding. Somehow Amelia got the idea in her head that I would be willing to make an even greater contribution to Reese's upcoming wedding. I could tell something foul was afoot when she came into the living room and started talking to me in a sweet tone. This was unusual, as Amelia was often curt and dismissive towards me, no matter what the situation was. Amelia started asking me how I've been and telling me how she thought it was so sweet and kind to me to have contributed financially to Sean's wedding. I nearly laughed in Amelia's face because it was as plain as day that she was lying through her teeth. I was tired of her crap, so I bluntly asked her what it was that she wanted. Once Amelia could tell I was on to her game, her entire demeanor changed in the blink of an eye. Be suspicious of people who are capable of this, my readers here, because this is one of the ultimate signs that you're dealing with a toxic manipulator. Amelia then laid bare her entire deck of cards. She told me point blank that I should pay for Reese's wedding. My jaw nearly dropped to the floor as I was in such disbelief. Can you imagine something so absurd? I work at a social media company, and does Amelia live in the solar system? Even though I had heard and understood her the first time, all I could manage to blurt out was, "What?" Amelia explained that both she and Reese agree that it would only be fair to the family if I were to pay for the entire wedding. I asked Amelia if she meant to pay for the entire thing or half of it. I didn't even want to pay for half of it, mind you, but that was a more reasonable request than the whole darn thing. Well, Amelia made it clear that she meant the entire wedding, and As I'd stated before, Reese thought of herself as some sort of fanciful princess or queen, whereas Sean's wedding had been a low-key and relatively affordable affair. Amelia explained that Reese wanted a huge and lavish, luxurious wedding, and I simply could not stop myself from rolling my eyes. Amelia explained all these silly and ridiculous demands to me as if this was a commonplace conversation and not an act of sheer lunacy. My whole life I've had to tiptoe around just to keep the peace in the household. Well, I was sick and tired of it. I flat out told Amelia no. I told her there's no way I could afford to pay for an entire wedding on my salary, and I told her I didn't even want to do it anyways. Amelia's so clueless and blind that she asked me why I would not want to help. I started laughing in her face. I reminded Amelia that she and Reese had treated Sean and me like crap our entire lives. I told her the reason I helped out with Sean's wedding was because I actually considered him a family member. I told Amelia that she and Reese had never treated me like a family, and so they could pay for their own wedding themselves. Amelia was absolutely furious. She gets so upset she knocked over a glass vase onto the floor and it shattered. My father is such a coward, he simply got up from his computer and closed the door to his office. He'd heard the entire confrontation and was not willing to stand up for me. What a plastic, pathetic slime ball of a father. He always bows down to her every demand, and he acts like Amelia isn't intimidating as Alexander the Great. It's been a week since the huge fight between Amelia and me, and the tension is so thick in this household that you could cut it with a knife. Amelia has been making my life a living heck, and she's been treating Sean the same way, and I just understand being upset with me, but the fact that Amelia's taking out her anger toward me on Sean is simply despicable. She's a giant turd. She's been making noise at all hours of the night, keeping Sean and me from sleeping, and we have real jobs that we work to make a living, and Amelia doesn't even have a job, so she can't possibly empathize with our need to sleep. She's been getting drunk and blasting Limp Bizkit, Korn, Insane Clown Posse, and all sorts of awful music. It's been driving me crazy, and sure enough, my father is too big of a wimp. He's too big of a clown to dare ask Amelia to amend her behavior even slightly. Guys, he's just so spineless. Guys, I ask again, I'm about to lose my marbles. What should I do? People, please answer. I can't continue living the sea of madness inside of this household. I work for a social media company, and I simply don't make enough money to move out on my own yet. Obviously, Sean and I need to find a way out of here. We can't afford to have any more wasted years in this household. I'll take any advice you people are willing to toss my way. Update number 1. Hey guys, I'm back with another update. Well, OP here, it's time. I read all your comments. There was a lot of great advice, and I must admit some of you were a tad harsh about the situation. But sometimes a harsh truth is what you need to hear. Yes, I know Sean and I are in our mid-20s living in the family home, but guys, you have to understand it's been very difficult saving up money in an economically depressed town such as our own. However, Sean and I took the advice of many of you mentioning in the comments. We realized after reviewing our finances that Sean and I made high enough combined salaries between us that we could afford to move into a small apartment on the rough end of town. We decided anything was better than our current living quarters. I'm not a prisoner, I'm a free woman. Not to mention the house has been even more cramped and stressful when Sean's wife had moved in with us. Amelia's not exactly kind of welcoming to Sean's wife, and this adds to the tension in the household. It stunk even worse that Amelia's practically kissing Reese's husband's butt. It turns out Sean and I were smart to get a head start on this whole moving out business. When Amelia discovered Sean and me in the act of gathering our belongings and packing up our stuff to move out, Amelia practically blew a fuse. She was shouting at us, demanding to know what we were doing and where we thought that we were going. I told her to shut her mouth because we were moving out and not putting up with her crap anymore, just so she knows. Amelia simply told us that we could not move out. She said that she needed us around to help with Reese's wedding, and I laughed in the old fool's face. My father ran out of his own home office and demanded to know what is going on. You know what? I just straight up ignored him. That's right. What was he going to do? He's a wimp. Amelia admitted that she's planned on having us evicted anyways, and I laughed and told her that, well, we must be doing her a favor. Wish me luck, guys. Sean's wife and I are living in a new apartment now, and now I no longer feel like a stranger in a stranger land inside my own home. Update number 2. Hey guys, I'm back again. Well, OP here with another update. I wish I could say things are getting better now that Sean and I have moved out of our putrid and rotten family home, but things are getting even crazier. Amelia does not seem to want to take anything lightly. She's got to blow everything out of proportion, as she always does, and it seems now she's recently been completely hell-bent on ruining my job and my professional reputation. As I mentioned in a previous post, I work at a social media company. I'm a content creator as well as a moderator of several social media pages. It might sound like an easy job, but it's quite a lot of work. Well, Amelia unfortunately knew what company I worked for, even though I assume she didn't even know that much about me. Here's how completely nuts Amelia is. She showed up at my workplace and tried to file a complaint against me. She told my coworkers at the front desk that I was a rotten person who, quote, did not care about her family. They were obviously quite perplexed and even a bit frightened by all of this crap. So they asked me what's going on, and I had to explain the whole embarrassing situation to my boss. Amelia was escorted off the work premises, and the police did not arrest her or even take my concerns about her seriously. Things have become even crazier now, and Amelia has taken her war against me into the realms of cyberspace. She's bombarding my social media, guys, with negative and highly personal revealing comments. I'm doing my best to moderate something, but she has no job of responsibilities of her own that she must attend to, you know. So, she can just dedicate her entire day to this childish trolling. My boss said all this negativity and publicity on the social media pages is actually hurting the company, guys. I'm so tired of this. Amelia can't just leave me alone. So I want to ask you guys again, what do I do? Update number 3. Hello, everyone. I think I've made a breakthrough. There are a lot of details to go over, so bear with me. I'll try to get to the point as quickly as I can, so... After my last update, I was getting a lot of concerned comments regarding the amount of trolling and harassment from Amelia, which I was unfortunately enduring. It's been a few days since then, so I'm sure you're all curious if Amelia's childish behavior has ceased. Sadly, it has not. She's still trolling up a storm on all my workplace social media pages, and even if I block her, she keeps making new profiles. She's too dumb to hide her name, so I always know it's her. She uses the same picture of herself in every single profile that she makes. What an old fool. Anyways, I was doing some investigation, and among all the negative and harassments, I saw a curious comment from a mysterious man that piqued my interest. Right there in the comment section, underneath one of Amelia's hateful and scornful diatribes, was a comment from a man who looked to be about Amelia's age. The comment said, "You're still here. I'm just checking your profile. You're gorgeous, like 24 years ago." For some reason, I could not get that comment out of my mind, and I was drawn to it immediately. So I checked the man's profile, and his name was Ron Reese. And glancing at his information told me he went to the same high school as Amelia, and is the same age at 55. Same graduating class, and, well, they even have mutual friends on Facebook. I could not get this strange comment out of my mind. It was clear that this Ron Reese guy had some sort of personal connection to Amelia. That wasn't so much of a surprise, I'd say, because Amelia knows a lot of people, but the 24-year-ago part, it keeps eating away at me. And that's when it hit me like a ton of bricks. Reese is a 24-year-old, and my father and Amelia got married 24 years ago. Why the heck would this Ron Reese guy be talking about 24 years ago? I have to get to the bottom of this, and I don't have any recollection of a Ron Reese being even somewhat related to my family or a friend of the family. I remember all my father and Amelia's friends from when I was a child, and I would remember the name of somebody who shared a name with my foul stepsister. Do you guys on here have any advice that I could use? I decided to send this to Ron Reese because I want him to get a message on Facebook, but he has not responded to my message yet. I'm a bit nervous about it. Hopefully, I can get some answers so I can get some peace of mind about it. Update number 4. Oh boys, guys, so much has happened since my last update. There have been quite a few revelations today, and I want to fill you in on it. Ron Reese responded finally. I must admit, we arranged a meetup, and I was nervous about how I would be received. How was I to know he wasn't working with Amelia? My paranoia was starting to get to me, and luckily, Ron Reese soon put me at ease. He looked startlingly alike to Reese, but he was not nearly as sour or rude. He asked me what the purpose of this meeting was, and I'd only given him a couple of details when he arranged the Facebook meeting. All he truly knew was that this meeting was at the utmost importance to me. We exchanged awkward pleasantries, and then I got to the point. I asked him about his history with Amelia. I explained that Amelia was my evil stepmother who seemed determined to go from here to eternity just to make my life a living heck. I asked Ron Reese what the purpose of his 24 comment was, and he explained everything, and it became so clear. My initial hunch had indeed been correct. Ron Reese had attended high school with Amelia back in the 1980s, and they even had a relationship but grew apart after the graduation. After Amelia cheated on him, he told me that she was always a heartbreaker and had always been unfaithful to the men in her life. He said 24 years ago, he and Amelia reconnected and actually had a relationship. Wow. He said Amelia began acting strange at some point toward the end of the relationship and eventually ghosted him. He said he recently joined Facebook, tracked her down, and realized that she was still out there. But he said Amelia would not respond to any of the messages. It all became clear to me what happened, but I had to get proof. It was obvious Amelia had a relationship with Ron Reese at the same time that she's been courting my father. I asked Ron Reese if he would be willing to take a DNA test, just to prove that he was Reese's father. He agreed, and we both suspected Reese had been named after him. Well, when we got the results from the lab later on, we were spelled out plainly for all to see. Ron Reese was the true father of my stepsister Reese. It was confirmed that Amelia had committed an act of infidelity behind my father's back. I knew what I had to do to get even with my foul and rotten family. I called Amelia and spoke cordially with her. I acted apologetic and appealed to her massive ego to get on Amelia's good side. And then I offered to pay for half of Reese's wedding if she would, be willing to pay the other half. Amelia was ecstatic to hear this, and arrangements for the wedding are being made as we speak. But I've got a few tricks up my sleeve that'll drop a bombshell on this pathetic family. Final update. Hello everyone, OP here. I know it's been a while since my last update. I wanted to tie up some loose ends. This is going to be my final update because I believe this chapter of my life is finally over. Amelia always acted like she was Genghis Khan, but you all should have seen how pathetic she looked after I ruined Reese's wedding. I'll cut right to the chase. On the day of the wedding, Sean and I acted as cool as we could. We didn't know anything. The wedding festivities were beginning, and there was quite a crowd gathered just to see Reese marry a total idiot. Nobody knew Ron Reese was waiting on the sidelines. The venue organizers marched onto the floor and asked Amelia where the rest of the money that they were owed was. Amelia smugly replied that her stepdaughter, me, that means I would be taking care of it. Oh boy, my plan was coming into action now. I sharply pointed out that I had no reason to pay anything towards a wedding since Reese was not related to me. I pointed out that Reese was only related to 2 people in this room. Amelia and Ron Reese. Amelia's face turned ghostly white when she heard those words Ron Reese come out of my mouth. Without saying a word, Amelia gasped and tried to attack me for mentioning Ron Reese and exposing her scandalous affair. Well, her true colors were revealed to all and chaos erupted. But Ron revealed himself and confirmed everything I just said. The wedding was in an absolute uproar, and my father fell to his knees and began sobbing like a baby, begging to know why Amelia betrayed him. Family members and friends of the family who were present at the wedding were demanding to know the meaning of what's going on. Amelia had always just been able to pull the wool over everyone's eyes and manipulate them, but now she had been exposed. That's when I looked at my father in the eye and told him, "Now you can turn a deaf ear to the fact that your wife's been cheating on you, just like you ignored Sean and me when we came to you for help." Something snapped in my father at that moment, and Amelia looked like a deer in the headlights. It's funny. She always has a lot to say in her defense in any given argument. Amelia always had a list of excuses to use, but right then she was completely silent. My father looked Amelia right in the eyes and told her the marriage is over. He was shaking his head, sobbing, talking about how he wasted 2 decades of his life on this foul woman. Amelia tried to explain it away anyways, claiming that the situation was not what it looked like, but Ron Reese only reiterated the truth. He showed the printed DNA results for everyone to see. Despite all the abuse and neglect I received from my own father, I still loved him. I still felt bad for him, but Sean and I knew that he had made these decisions, and now he was the one who had to live with them. Reese and her goofball, Sluter, stood there looking confused. I must admit I did not have much shame in ruining their special day. Suddenly, the gravity of what happened seemed to hit her like a ton of bricks, and she cried, "My dad isn't my dad?" and began sobbing as her fiancé and the other wedding attendees tried to comfort her. Sean and I glanced at each other and had an immediate understanding without even saying a word. We could see that the family's lying had been exposed, and the family dynamic had been clearly irreparably damaged by what we just revealed at the wedding. Well, we've moved away from our family now, and I'm currently working remotely and living with Sean and his beloved wife in another city. Thank you, everybody, for supporting me throughout this mess. Alright guys, let's talk about this one. Let's talk about Sean Reese, Ron Reese. Let's just get into it. I was actually reading some of the comments, and I was a bit surprised. A lot of the people, they were saying how OP went too far, exposing everybody on the wedding day, and this should have been done privately, especially with bringing Ron Reese in and having the big spectacle of him showing the DNA test in front of everyone at the wedding. I mean, there was a lot going on. So, let me know what you guys think. Do you think it was justified what OP decided to do, and how OP decided to do it? My stepsister and stepmother are completely jealous that I'm about to get married before her daughters do. So now they're trying to absolutely ruin my best day, but I'm not going to go down without a fight. So I tricked them. A little bit of old-fashioned revenge. I let them think that they were in the high-up position and could call all the shots for the wedding, and then I pulled the rug right out from underneath their feet. I don't know if I was just unlucky, but I was thinking I'd find someone who would replace my mother after she died of cancer. But I was wrong. My mom passed away when I was a teenager, and after she died, my dad and I never remained the same. Every morning I would wake up hoping my deceased mom would just open the door to my room, tell me that her death was all a prank. So everything would return to normal, but that never happened. After some years, Dad remarried Melissa. At first I thought Melissa and her daughters, my stepsisters, were a blessing from God, because she was my father's friend and was always around to cheer him up. Before she got married to Dad, she looked after me like I was her own. At least that's what I thought until I convinced my father to marry Melissa because I liked her. My biggest mistake ever. Well, Melissa was a divorcee with 2 daughters, Celine and Maria. They were both older than me, and I looked up to them as older sisters. When Dad finally agreed to marry Melissa, I was happy for us, though I was already grown up and I still needed that mother figure in my life. And Melissa seemed to be the perfect candidate. Her daughters were not really my friends, but they made me feel like I was a part of them, and this helped me a lot during my grieving period. Melissa was the kind of woman whom I'd say made some good business decisions, and things turned out well for her. Her former husband was equally rich, but after they divorced, she left with part of his money, and this really contributed to her success. Dad, on the other hand, was just middle class. We paid our bills on time and had just enough to sustain us until the next salary was being paid. So, I was quite sure Melissa was not hanging around because of my father's money. She did love him, and it was really foolish of me to think that she would extend that love to me. Well, after Dad and Melissa got married, she suggested that we moved into her house since it was bigger and fancier, and I thought this was a great idea. My father did not see it as a big deal, and besides, it would be very, hard for her and her 2 daughters to move into our house. So we moved to theirs. Her house was a way bigger one, and she lived in a better neighborhood, so this was a good plan. Some days after we moved, I noticed the way Melissa treated me to begin with. It was changing. It started with her daughters leaving leftover food for me in the kitchen, and wanting me to do their dishes because I was the youngest in the house. As of this time, I was only 15 years old, and both of them were at least 3 years older than me. I complained to Melissa and my father about it, and she would call her daughters and yell at them in my father's presence, but each time this happened, things got worse. Let me really explain who Celine and Maria were. They were really dirty pigs, who only looked good, blinky, and nice outside, but inside they were terrible baby pigs. Oh, I think in the space of 4 months, we had to call cleaners twice to come clean their rooms, because of the horrendous smell that came out of there whenever they opened the doors. It literally looked like a nest. They didn't do anything to help around the home anymore, not even the least as washing their own dishes. Everything just became my responsibility from the day we moved in. I didn't even want to remember when the laundry machine wasn't working. My stepmom made sure I did the laundry by hand, including her clothes and her daughter's clothes too. I was in charge of grocery shopping, cooking, cleaning the house, and any possible chore you can think of. The most emotional part was this. Every time I complained to my father about how I was being maltreated, Melissa would pull the emotional blackmail card and tell my father I was just being too lazy and he was simply spoiling me. She'd even go as far as quoting her usual lines. "Well, God knows I'm trying to be a good mother, James, but she thinks I'm punishing her. Meanwhile, I'm training her to become a good woman." Well, with these words and fake tears in her eyes, my father would support her and not me. So with this, I grew up to be the black sheep of the family while my stepmother's hate grew for me. She always wanted everyone in the house to be happy, except me. She would even go shopping for my dad and her daughters, but would not get anything for me ever. And my dad barely noticed because I was forced to wear hand-me-down clothing. Clothes Celine and Maria had already worn. Speaking of birthdays, I never really got to celebrate mine. She'd always promised to get me a cake whenever my dad was around, and would deliberately always end up forgetting. Years passed by, and I began to accept my reality. It was a good thing that I made friends with other teenagers in the neighborhood, and whenever I wasn't at home being their maid, I was always spending time at a friend's house. One time, my dad had traveled for work conference in another state, leaving me home alone with Melissa and my stepsisters. From the minute my dad moved, Melissa asked me to clean the whole house, make sure it was spotless, mow the lawn, and even do the laundry. And because I didn't want any trouble, I had to do all she asked me to do. But I lost my cool after. I returned to see the kitchen I had already cleaned in a very terrible shape. Celine and Maria decided they wanted to bake a cake and some pastries. I literally knocked down the water, milk, and flour, spilled butter on the counter, and made a mess everywhere. When the baking process did turn out the way they wanted it, they abandoned it and asked me to clean it up, and of course, Melissa supported them. At this point, I've had enough of them, and I was so exhausted. I told Melissa I wasn't going to clean the kitchen twice, and she slapped me for talking back to her. And then she said I would not live under her roof and disobey her, so she kicked me out that evening. I ended up crashing at a friend's place, and as I expected, she told my father lies. And he would not let my phone rest. Down the line, college came, and I was grateful to God for finally leaving Melissa's hellhole. College was in a different city, so I moved away. I knew my dad was going to miss me, but he had Melissa and their girls. And from the look of things, they obviously preferred him, not me. I was in college, and then I met Hendrik. He was in business, and I was in human psychology. Hendrik was almost rounding up when we met, but we didn't allow that to come between us. We connected so well, and he gave me the love I've always yearned for. Hendrik and I dated for 2 years. He was lucky to get a job right after he left the college, so hey, I moved in with him. I was also working part-time to support myself, since I did not want anything to do with my stepmother's money. Also, in all the years I've been away at college, I only visited home on Christmas Eve and returned the same week. I did not want to spend a week under my toxic stepmother's roof. Every time I returned home, they'd complain I had changed, but they only said this because I was no longer the emotional weak girl that they could manipulate and treat as they liked. Whenever they said this, I'd just smile and say, "Things change, people grow." And somehow this sentence would really infuriate Celine and Maria. They were now so grown and complete disaster of a mess. They blamed each other for their clumsiness and mistakes, and Melissa certainly did not have a problem with the two grown women who has no jobs, no relationships, and are completely ambitionless. I'd say life for Celine and Maria was a Barbie concert. They never lived in real reality. They've always just acted like they were in the spotlight, and the world was just watching them. But in reality, they had no one in their lives except Melissa and my father. They sucked at making friends and could not even have boyfriends because they believed their Prince and Charming would just come and sweep them off their feet someday. Celine and Maria depend on Melissa to hook them up with sons of her rich business associates. And after one terrible fight over a man between the both of them, Melissa stopped. At least she was sensible enough to save her career. On the brighter side, things got more intense between Hendrik and me. And he even asked me to marry him. It wasn't the ideal night proposal close to the Eiffel Tower type thing that I always imagined as a teenage girl, but it was the most beautiful moment of my life. I said yes, and since he was already making plans for the wedding behind my back, I figured it was time for him to meet my family. He always wanted to meet them, but having a stepmother like Melissa and stepsisters like Celine and Maria who did not like me, I've always postponed our visits until he asked me to marry him. I called home that I was coming in with someone during the weekend, so everybody could be home. I'm happy. I told Hendrik about my stepmother and stepsisters, so he could see through their pretense and not fall for their drama. When I got home, I introduced Hendrik to everyone and they all acted nice, most especially Celine and Maria. They wore tops that exposed their cleavages, and they even had makeup on. I knew what they were trying to do, but I had to play along. Melissa looked very glad to see Hendrik. She even asked if he wanted anything. So she could go into the kitchen, but Hendrik denied. Deep down, I knew Melissa wasn't happy for me. Her daughters were due for marriage, but nobody wanted them. Even though the daughters of Melissa's younger sister were married, but her daughters continued to live in her home. As a tradition in our family, I was not allowed to plan my wedding without my family. And this meant I had to plan with my dad, Melissa, and her daughters. In a nutshell, they made the planning absolute hell, and I almost called off the entire thing. They disagreed with almost everything I wanted. They disagreed with my wedding gown, shoes, jewelry, food, event planner, and almost everything. It wasn't like she was paying for the wedding. Hendrik, me, and his family were taking care of all the bills, and not even a dollar contribution was coming from Melissa. I made that clear from the first day. Finally, after weeks of going back and forth, we all agreed on a couple of things. Melissa asked me to make one of her daughters my maid of honor. She literally wanted to force that down my throat. I knew she was trying to manipulate me again, and there was no way I'd make either Celine or Maria my maid of honor. They were neither my friends nor sisters, but because my dad was on the table, I agreed to it. This was only to make them happy and feel like they had control over me, but deep down, I knew who my maid of honor was. And I wasn't going to let any of my stepsisters take that position. Another thing we disagreed on was the venue of the wedding. I always had this ideal hall for my wedding dream. It wasn't too big and it wasn't too small. I just wanted it to be a long walk down the aisle, and Hendrik thought it was perfect. But not Melissa and my stepsisters. They said it's just too fancy, and since Hendrik and I were not so rich, we could either do a beach wedding or a field wedding. I didn't want to do any of that. Right from when Hendrik proposed, I started to save money for the wedding hall. It was what I really wanted, and Hendrik respected that. For me, it wasn't really the wedding dress, the makeup, or the jewelry. It was about the venue. Melissa was right, though. The hall was quite expensive, and she didn't think that we could afford it because she didn't want us in such a beautiful place. By the way, everything she and her daughters picked out was trash. The wedding dress they loved was an eyesore. Their cake of choice made me disgusted. They obviously just picked what they loved. And their choice of jewelry looked like some Barbie costume, including the dress for the bridal train. The only pretty dress, which was by far prettier than my wedding dress, was guess who? The maid of honors. Hendrik and I understood what was going on, so we just played along. Aside from not making any of her daughters my maid of honor, we weren't going with any of their plans. Hendrik and I already hired a trusted wedding planner, and she took care of everything for us. I knew the wedding dress I was going to wear, I knew my jewelry, even the makeup artist, everything. Would you even believe Celine and Maria said I didn't need makeup because I was naturally beautiful? I laughed. Whenever I remember this, it's just, my fiancé and I knew what we were going into, and we were so prepared. We knew the whole drama of concern from Melissa and her daughters was just to ruin my big day. They acted like they really cared and spent time with us just to make sure my wedding was a disaster. But I wasn't going to let that happen. It was a great thing they were too lazy to shop with me. So whenever they asked if I've gotten the things I needed, I'd said yes, and they would fake a smile. We took about a month to get the money for the wedding venue since it was a bit expensive. Before this, we made the necessary calls to the venue, and they only agreed to get part of the payment and the remaining payment before the wedding day. Hendrik and I put down 20% since we had a lot to take care of. But when it was time to complete the payment, we were told the venue had been booked for the same day, and they even refunded our money. This was a big disappointment on my end. I knew how much I wanted that venue, but since we were running out of time, I had to search for a new place, or I'd end up doing the field wedding like Melissa and my stepsister suggested. What is up, everybody? Mr. Reddito here. I hope you're enjoying your day so far. Update number 1, it came out just some weeks later. If you guys aren't subscribed to the channel yet, go ahead and do that. It does support me a lot, and I really appreciate all the support from you guys. Here is update number 1. A few weeks later, lucky for Hendrik and me, we found a nice venue, and it was not even expensive as the first. On the good side, this helped us in channeling the money that was meant for the first hall in different things. I wasn't mad at the venue owners per se. They were not going to tie down their venue for someone who'd paid 20%, while they literally had somebody ready to pay in full. Though, yeah, it was very disappointing. I moved past it. When I told Melissa and my stepsisters that someone else had booked the venue, they pretended to be sad for me and encouraged me to go with the field wedding, which was almost no cost. Right there, my gut told me they had something to do with it since they did not look surprised. I lived with them for years, so I could tell if something took them by surprise or if they were just obviously pretending. The preparations for our wedding continued, and I made my payback plans too. I bought the exact fabric Melissa and her daughters had chosen for the maid of honor dress, and I invited a fashion designer to take their measurements and make their dresses. I told them it'd be unfair of me to pick one sister since both of them were my favorite, so I asked them both to be my maids of honor. It was a very unusual thing to see, but I wanted them to have a taste of their own medicine. They were both excited, and they thought it was the sweetest thing ever. My dad and Melissa were impressed with what I have done, but that wasn't all. I fixed my bridal shower and invited my 2 stepsisters too. Normally, I would not make such a mistake. The bridal shower was to hold 2 weeks after the fixed date, so this gave me time to get to know them very well. I told them I wanted them to be a part of the bridal shower, so I needed to know the kind of drinks they loved and the ones they did not love. From the looks on their faces, it was obvious they fell for everything, and this pleased me. I dreamed so much of humiliating them that I could not think of anything else. You can call me petty if you want, but these women made life miserable for me. I was their live-in maid for years. One time, Melissa even convinced my father to move my room to her basement, because the luxury of my room was making me lazy and disrespectful. It still baffles me. What luxury she was talking about? The only thing I had was a wardrobe, a bed, a chair, and a table. I was able to buy a mirror and a coat hanger from a thrift store with the money I saved for weeks. My room was nothing compared to her daughter's rooms, which looked like a mini mall, and she dared call that luxury? Update number 2. As believable as this sounds, it breaks my heart so much. I know Melissa hated me, but I didn't think she would go as far as to do what she did. A week before the wedding, I was home alone. Melissa and her daughters had gone shopping as usual, and my father had gone off to work, and I was trying to rest my head. I was still asleep when I heard Celine on the phone. She was obviously talking to Maria, and my guess is she was not expecting me to be there. Before they left, I told them I was going out to shop for a few things, and I wouldn't be back until the evening. But I changed my mind because of the one-sided headache that would not go away, and I took that as my cue to come home and stay and just rest. While she was on the phone, she said, and I quote, "Oh, poor thing. How do you think she's going to react if she finds out Mother booked her wedding venue for nothing, just so she could teach her a lesson?" And then she laughed. The house was so quiet, so I know what I heard word for word. The next thing, I tiptoed to the door, which was not fully shut, and recorded her on the call. The remaining part of her conversation, I sent it to Hendrik, and he was so mad Melissa could not even think to do something like that to us, could she? He wanted to come over and confront her, but I knew that would ruin the plans I had for my stepsisters, so I asked him to play it cool. I wanted everything to be done and over with. I knew Melissa did not like me, and she wanted to ruin my wedding plans because I got married before her daughters. Though I don't really believe that's the whole reason. Even if her daughters were married before me, she would still try to ruin my plans. When Melissa returned home, I asked her if she would love to do the mother and daughter dance with me, but she declined. She blatantly said that she would love to do her first mother-daughter dance with any of her biological daughters. And well, yeah, I understood that. I looked at my father, who was sitting there with us, and I gave him a "I told you so" look. I thought he would try and convince Melissa to dance, but he just remained quiet. He was definitely tired of her attitude towards me, and if he insisted, Melissa would remind him of how she had been such a fantastic mother to me, and that she doesn't deserve to be talked to in that manner. That night, while we had dinner, I was so mad at everyone, including my father. I was mad that he allowed me to go through all the terrible, inhumane things in hands of Melissa and her daughters, and he did nothing about it. My dad was the typical meek, soft man who did not love any form of trouble or fighting, and that's why he avoided having arguments or ever fighting with Melissa. Update number 3. I know I told Hendrik to keep his cool and not tell my father about Melissa booking my wedding venue, but he broke his side of the promise. At first, I regretted the actions that followed, but if he did not react that way, maybe things would not have turned out the way they did. Remember, I said Melissa was used to my dad being all meek and gentle. He had never raised his voice at her or showed anger. When my dad found out what Melissa had done, he confronted her. The craziest part was that it was on the day we had a couple of visitors at home. It was 3 days to my wedding. And Hendrik tried to keep it in, but the more he spoke and saw Melissa pretending to care, the more infuriating he was. As I said, my dad confronted Melissa about it. She denied booking the hall, and she pulled the emotional blackmail card and told me, well, Dad, that she knew how much I loved and wanted the venue, and she would never do such a terrible thing to me. She was so good at pretending that it was almost believable. My father, who had already listened to the recording I sent to Hendrik, was not buying her crap. So he asked Hendrik to play the recording, and when she recognized her daughter's voice, it seemed like she forgot how to speak. To be honest, it was my first time and their first time seeing my dad so angry. He turned the color of a beet, and he had veins popping out of his neck. She was so afraid of what my dad would do next, so she lied. The stare that she gave to Celine showed how furious she was at her for exposing their secret. Even Celine could not deny receiving that call too. Everyone who came to visit was a surprise too, including people from her office. She carried herself like a sweet butterfly who would never hurt anyone, and no one believed that she could do it. When she had seen the disappointment and shock on their faces, she began to laugh so hard and then stopped. Melissa said she booked the venue as a surprise for me because she knew how much I wanted it, and since I did not let her contribute to the wedding, this was her own wedding gift to me. Oh boy, this woman was such a good liar. Hendrik and I knew she was lying, as she was so good at it that everyone believed her. With these words, she succeeded in pacifying my father. He always fell for her lies, but not me. Then she pretended to be mad and said Celine and my father had ruined her surprise. My dad apologized for his actions and thanked her for being such a great mom to me. Ugh, roll my eyes. Yeah, great mom indeed. The only good thing was, Hendrik and I ended up using my dream wedding venue, and we didn't even have to pay a penny for it. Got her. Update number 4. Final update posted by OP. On the night of the bridal shower, I made sure that Celine and Maria drank in a stupor. Yes, this was my plan. I wanted them to get so drunk that they got a hangover the next day, and that's why I made sure that there were enough of their favorite alcohol to go around. And like I expected, they got wasted. The next day was my wedding day, and things went as planned for Hendrik and me. My maid of honor was my closest friend from college. She traveled into town the day before our wedding, and she was all part of the plan. Celine and Maria did not go back home that night, so they slept in the hotel room, leaving just Melissa and my father to go to our wedding from home. Before I left the hotel room, I switched off their mobile phones and left them in the bathroom, so it'd take them minutes to find them. I can swear I'd seen Melissa's mouth fall off when she saw me walking down the aisle in a very beautiful wedding dress and not the ugly gown that she picked out. What surprised her the most was not seeing her daughters as my maid of honor as we had planned. She kept looking out for them, but she couldn't find them. From the front of the hall where I stood, I saw her with the phone, and I knew she was trying to call her daughters. The expression on her face was everything to die for. She sat next to my father, and it was really obvious that she was worried, but my dad didn't even pay much attention to her. Once I said my vows and it was time for the wedding reception, she found her way to me and asked if I've seen my sisters. I told her the last time I saw them was during the bridal shower, and they had so much to drink, which meant they were either still sleeping or at home. Like the smart lady, well, she asked me how I was able to find a maid of honor to replace my sister so quickly. And that's when I told her I never intended for any of her daughters to be my maid of honor. It was me playing along all the time. I'm sure at that point she realized everything when she saw my wedding cake. It was the exact color, size, and shape. Everything I wanted it to be. By this time, it was noon and she could not just get mad and leave the wedding. So she stayed because she respected my father. Not long after Melissa and I spoke, Celine and Maria showed up in their maid of honor dresses. They looked like a total mess and the smell of alcohol was still strong on their breath. I wasn't expecting them to show up at all, but they did, and everything turned out just as I wanted. Melissa, Celine, and Maria were so angry when they realized they were the same fabric design as the people who were hired to serve. Yeah, you liked that touch, didn't you? I specifically got the same fabric for all 4 girls, and I asked my designer to make their clothes. When they could not bear the shame, especially after inviting their friends, they went home with Melissa. My dad didn't stay mad for long, and even if he did, I had paid them back with the same coin. After the wedding, Hendrik and I went on a luxury honeymoon, with the money that we had saved up by not renting the expensive hall, since Melissa had graciously taken care of the bill. This was the sweetest part of our wedding. As a grand part of our honeymoon, we took a couple of cute pictures, made a post on Facebook and tagged Melissa to it. I can't say she didn't see them, I'm sure she did, even if she didn't. Celine or Maria must have showed them to her. And I know she's not going to forgive herself for being so stupid in a very long time. When the wedding pictures were out, we noticed the photographer took cool shots of my stepsisters with the other girls in the same uniform. She must have thought they all worked together. So I uploaded them on Facebook, and I tagged Celine and Maria and thanked them especially for being my maids of honor. Then I blocked them swiftly afterwards. Yeah, I know it was petty, but it made me feel great. Hendrik and I returned to the state we lived in before we hadn't heard from them till now. Though my dad visits once in a while, but Melissa and her daughters, they're simply just not part of my life anymore. Thank you guys so much for the support in the comment section. There's a lot of stories that I've read on this channel and a lot of stories that we've gone through. I don't know if I've seen a diabolical plan / revenge / pettiness work out so well in OP's favor. I mean, she even planned it down to have other bridesmaids there. She knew that those 2 sisters were not going to show up. I would like to know what you guys thought about this story. Make sure you drop it down in the comment section down below and let me know how bad that this stepmother actually was. But to me, I think the ultimate enemy of this story is OP's father. He just didn't seem to care about his daughter. He let his new wife, run all over his biological daughter and didn't really care to intervene and just always believed her lies. So let me know. If you had a say and you were OP and you were in their position, what would you do to this wicked stepmother? My stepmom is bragging because I'm going to be disinherited after my father passed, but the joke's on her because my father, he found out exactly what she was up to before he passed away, and you guys should see the look on her face at the will reading. So I've got a stepmom. Now, I know what you guys are probably expecting as soon as you read that sentence, but that's not it. I mean, she was cruel to me, but that's not the only reason she's the villain in the story. She was also cruel to my father, who put time, effort, and money into making sure that she was happy and satisfied with everything that she had. My dad and I, we weren't super close, but we had a good relationship before the stepmom, Bailey, came into the picture. I was closer to my mom in every situation, and anytime I needed something or someone, I'd go to my mom. She was honestly my best friend when I was an angsty teenager and wanted nothing to do with my parents or my family. I was 12 when I went through that phase. I hated everyone and everything, and I just wanted to be alone during that time, which is why I feel like I left my mom alone in a lot of situations where I could have spent time with her. I didn't know my time with her was so limited though. How could I have known? She was healthy. She was eating well. She was working out every day. There was nothing wrong with her, or so we thought. Until one day, suddenly my mom starts having these weird symptoms that none of us were sure about. Right in the middle of the grocery store. At first she was probably, something like anxiety or so, but it got worse and she starts throwing up. Her jaw was hurting really bad, so we took her to the hospital. That's when the doctor told us that the symptoms that she was experiencing were a heart attack symptom, not anxiety. The reason my mom thought that they were anxiety symptoms was because she used to suffer from anxiety, which affected her physical health as well. She'd have jaw pain, shoulder pain, all of which were physical signs of anxiety. So when she got them again, she thought it's just the same thing all over. I mean, I don't blame her, but I wish my dad and I would have taken those signs a bit more serious than we did. She died of a heart attack soon after we reached the hospital, and we were told that there was nothing that we could have done to make it better because we brought her in too late. I was devastated. So was my dad. I involved myself in school and extracurriculars so much that I did not have the time to think about grieving. I just kept distracting myself anytime I would feel myself getting sad. That was my defense mechanism. My dad's defense mechanism was anger. He wouldn't scream or shout, but he's redirecting it, all the sadness and grief he was feeling, into annoyance and irritability. And because I was the only one living in the house with him, he took it out on me. However, he was still a good father during that time. Things started changing when he met Bailey, my stepmom. They met during a business meeting or something. I'm not exactly sure. However, I know that they did not work in the same company as each other. At least that's what Dad told me when he first introduced her to me. He started it off really light. He had asked me how I felt without Mom being here all the time, if I missed having a female figure in the family, and if I would ever want one, things like that. I did not think much of it because I thought he was genuinely curious about me and how I was doing. Dealing with Mom's death, considering it's only been less than a year since she's passed away. But then one night when we were having dinner together, Dad suddenly threw this bomb at me. He told me that he was seeing someone and she was interested in him a lot, and how nice she was and stuff like that. He seemed so happy about the entire situation that I didn't think twice before agreeing to meet her. In my head, if she was nice enough to my dad, happy after he sulked the entire year just trying to get over Mom, then I would do anything I could to support him and show him that I would not let anything hinder his happiness, because that's what mattered to me the most. At first, Bailey was really nice. I mean, the first time she came over, she even brought me flowers and a cute shade of lipstick that I absolutely adored. It was so nice and satisfying to finally see the color come back to my dad's eyes and face just by being around this woman. She was also really sweet to me. She made sure I was included in the conversation, and she made sure I felt comfortable, and that I knew I could ask her anything. So obviously I thought she was perfect for my dad. How could she not be when she made my dad so happy? A week after that, my dad told me that they'd made it official and that they're dating each other now. I was happy for them, and I started seeing more of her at the house as well. It was nice, it was fun, everything was going great. Then they decided to get engaged, and
Their engagement and their marriage felt so rushed, and I could not even explain what was happening. I had no clue how to deal with it because it felt like one day they were engaged and the next day they were already planning their marriage. Again, I didn't really care that much because Dad was happy and everything was going fine. I was actually optimistic that life was going to get so much better now that we're going to have additional support systems in the family. Of course, my luck was crappy, because not only did her attitude change towards me, but she managed to convince my dad that I wasn't worth all the attention either. I was 16 when they got married, and right now I'm almost 19, so it's been 3 years since I've had to endure her and her stupid ideologies and rules in my life. Dad's attitude started changing really fast. He would not give me attention, he would not care about what I was doing, he would not even talk to me some days. He would be so involved with Bailey and whatever she wanted to do that he completely forgot that he had a daughter. It's like he took care of my financial problems and all that, but he wasn't there for me emotionally as a father should be. At one point, I asked him if I could borrow some money, because I wanted to go to this concert with my friends, and he gets really mad at me because Bailey told him that it's super ungrateful of me to try to ask him for money, especially because, well, I was already living underneath his roof for free and eating the food and stuff for free as well. I was shocked because my father has never made me feel like I could not ask him for money if I needed to. So, to see him act this way was very alarming. Then it starts to get worse because he just took out all the frustrations on everybody else and everything that he got from work and anywhere else on me, because he was too much of a simp to take it out on Bailey. So I'd always brace myself and just be mentally prepared to take insults and taunts. If my dad was in a bad mood, if he was in a good mood, he barely paid attention to me. Since this continued, I figured that he would not really care about me. I could do whatever I wanted without any consequence of my actions. That's when I started to act out. I partied every day, I hung out with my friends all day, and I never helped around the house, and I started to ignore both of my parents as well. My dad did not even notice that I was trying to ignore him or something like that. But when I started doing it to Bailey and started ignoring her calls, she started to get mad. The only reason I didn't want to pick up her calls was that she only called me if she needed me to do some work. Most of the time, I was so tired with classes and my part-time job that I did not really have the energy to do all the chores in the house as well. But none of them ever regarded me or my concerns, and instead told me that if I wanted to keep living in the house, I needed to pull my weight somehow. Now, when I was ignoring her calls and stuff, she got mad and then she told my dad about it, and it made it seem like I was being rude to her. Dad was so mad at me. He came home and starts yelling at me about being a brat and not having any respect for others. That was also the first time he slapped me. The first of many. I honestly never expected him to be physically violent towards me. I didn't expect him to be rude towards me either, but then he changed completely and started treating me like a stranger. So I guess I should not have been that surprised about the entire thing. Anyways, things were really bad at the house. My dad was getting really abusive and mad at me, and Bailey did not seem to care about it at all. And to make matters worse, Bailey got pregnant. My gosh, you guys. When I tell you that Bailey got so much more manipulative after she got pregnant, it was actually insane. I mean, from what I suspect, it's because she wanted Dad to disinherit me from the will, and she wanted everything for her and her child. The best way to do that was to show my father that I was a brat who did not deserve anything from him, and that she and her child were personifications of angels upon earth. Obviously, the more manipulative she got, the worse my dad got as well. He did everything she asked her to, and I'm pretty sure if she told my father to kick me out of the house, he would have done it, no questions asked. Then, around 7 months after Bailey gave birth to her son, suddenly my father started getting really ill as well. I mean, he was getting weak, starting to lose weight, had a fever, and all that. So we took him to the doctor, and it turned out my father has stage 4 cancer. He has about 6 months left with us, even with all the treatments and everything. I was devastated. Even though he didn't really care for me, I still loved him, and in my head, I was still waiting for my dad, who was there for me all these years when Bailey was not in our lives. She ruined everything for us, and I'm pretty sure that she doesn't even care or regret anything. I figured out that she didn't really care about my father as well when the first thing she did when he was diagnosed with cancer was ask him if he'd written the will already or not. That's how I knew she was only after the money. Of course, as expected, my father died a few months later. It was terrible, but I'm also a little happy because the last month or so was so terrible for him. I could see how much pain he was in, and even though he was on medication and stuff, the chemotherapy and all the other treatments were very uncomfortable and painful to him. So that's why I'm glad that he's out of his misery right now, but I'm still a bit upset by how much he had changed. I don't even know if I should grieve him or not because I'm not grieving the dad that he died as. I'm grieving the dad that he was and the dad I was waiting to show up again. Anyways, it felt like Bailey wasn't grieving at all. She actually seemed pretty content because she must have realized that everything was going to her now that dad was no more. But boy, oh boy, was she wrong. The will reading. It happened yesterday and it was the wildest thing ever. Bailey and I got the biggest shock of our lives right there at the reading. Dad's trusted lawyer, the one who had been with Dad for his entire life, was the one who did the will reading. The entire time, Bailey was taunting me and telling me how she could not wait to kick me out of the house and let me rot, because she knew there was nothing that could be done for me now. She was very aggressive with her teasing and taunting as well, and it made me really, really angry. But I kept it in. A new father probably left her everything, even though before he died, I told Dad something that maybe made him realize that I was his daughter, and I was the one who truly cared about him. I can't go into the details about what I told him because it's super long, and I genuinely don't have time right now because everything went crazy during the will reading. As it turned out, Dad actually did listen to me. When Father's lawyer started reading the will, Bailey was acting all mighty and smug about the entire situation, but you know what? Then the bomb dropped. Dad left everything to me, every single thing, and Bailey was shocked to the core, and honestly so was I. With how whipped my father was for Bailey, I would have expected him to leave something to her, but nope, nothing. Everything was in my name now, even the house. The only condition that I had was I had to give Bailey a week before I could kick her out of the home, just so she can get her things packed up and sort everything out. The rest, everything was in my hands, and I felt so powerful, it's actually insane. Watching that smug expression fall from Bailey's face was priceless. Not just that, Father's lawyer also gave us some letters and told us that Dad wished that we would read them in private and not in front of everybody. So we both did not discuss that part, but Bailey kept arguing with the lawyer that there must be something wrong because my dad could never do that to her ever, no matter how hard the lawyer tried to convince Bailey that the will was legit. She was not ready to believe it and starts throwing a tantrum. I honestly could not handle all of it, so I got up and left, but before I did, I made sure to let her know that she had only one more week before I was going to kick her out. The shock on my face, it made my whole day. Honestly, I'm still thinking about it. Update number 1. So, I guess it's finally time to tell you guys what exactly my father changed in the will and gave everything to me, even though he slapped me multiple times and just did not care for me at all. But before I get into that, I need to give you guys the backstory of what actually happened, and, it made me reveal this secret. When we got home, Bailey just burst into her room and slammed the door, did not even acknowledge me or anything. I'm glad she did not, because I don't have energy to be dealing with her, but yeah, whatever. So, we both read the letter that Dad left for us, and I cried while reading mine. Basically, in my letter, Dad told me he believed what I had told him and was so sorry for how he treated me because he finally realized just how bad his wife has been treating me and manipulating him as well. According to him, it was like he was blindfolded and he didn't see what was happening right in front of him. However, he also acknowledged that it wasn't my fault. It was his fault for falling trap to Bailey's tricks, and not looking and listening to what I was trying to tell him. The letter was very heartfelt, and I actually started crying. It felt like my dad, the dad I loved, was back, and he died loving me and caring for me again, just like he did all those years ago. Anyways, Bailey's letter wasn't that heartfelt. Hers wasn't even a letter, if I'm being honest with you. She came barging into my room at the crack of dawn the day after the will reading and shoved her letter into my face. The laugh I let out was so hilarious. I could see it on her face that she did not expect me to let out a laugh like this at all. But her letter was just so funny. I knew my dad still had that cheekiness left in him. Anyways, her letter said, "That's what you get for cheating. That's it." Which is also exactly what I had told my dad. Bailey shoved the letter in my face and demanded that I explain what this was about, so I explained it to her. I'm about to explain it to you guys too. You see, a few months before my father passed away, I figured that Bailey was cheating on my dad. How I figured that out was, this was one time I was at this restaurant, a couple blocks away from my house, and I saw Bailey sitting there with a man, holding his hand and looking madly in love with him. I was shocked, obviously, because she was married to my father, and yet here she was, holding hands with another man. I overheard them talking about Daniel, Bailey's son, whom I used to think was my half-sibling, and the more I heard these conversations, the more I realized that Daniel wasn't even my dad's son. She had him with the guy that she was sitting with, and they were discussing how to keep the guy involved in Daniel's life without letting my dad know. Bailey was reassuring the guy that my dad had only a few months left, and that when he passed away, he would leave everything to her, so she would kick me out and have him stay with her in the house. Thank goodness for my quick thinking, because I recorded the entire conversation. I knew Dad would not believe me through my words, because he was still being manipulated by Bailey. Also, I knew that this recording would not be enough, so I figure I would get some extra proof. I sent Dad's hair and Daniel's hair for a DNA test to see if they matched. I knew they would not, and I also knew that there was no way my father would have been able to argue against objective and scientific facts. I got the results a month before Dad passed away, and I made sure to show to him when Bailey wasn't home, and I told him everything that happened, and he would not believe me at first. But I could tell he was just trying to fool himself because he kept looking at the DNA test results and just shaking his head. When I left the room, I genuinely thought that my father would not do anything about it, and it would probably scream at me later for butting into his business. I was equally as shocked when I heard that he left everything to me. When Bailey heard the truth of how Dad found out, she gets mad at me and starts cursing me out, screaming at me and blaming me for ruining her and Daniel's life. She also told me that if Daniel struggles in life because of all this, it would be my fault because I ruined it for him. I told her that if she cared about giving her child so much, she would not have done this in the first place, and reminded her that she had just had 6 more days to figure everything out before I would kick her out. Her reactions were honestly so satisfying, and I'm still thinking about them. Update number 2. The lawyer came back and brought even more good news for me. Bad news for Bailey, though. Anyways, yesterday the lawyer called and told us to meet him again because he had something important to discuss. I'm pretty sure Bailey thought that there was a mistake previously, and that she was getting something because she kept smiling at me throughout the entire car ride. And honestly, I was starting to get a bit anxious about the entire situation. Well, because Bailey seemed so confident. However, her confidence shattered when we reached there. According to the lawyer, there was another house that I inherited through my dad. Apparently, it belonged to my mom's parents, but when she died, my dad got control over it, and now that he was gone, and the fact that he left everything to me, well, it belonged to me. The lawyer even said that there was no condition on it or anything, and I had full control over the house to do whatever I wanted with it. I was so excited because finally I was getting something that would connect me to my mother as well, but alas, just like always, Bailey shattered that peace and excitement in less than 5 seconds. She created a fuss about how it's unfair that I was given so much and that she was given nothing. Then she started blaming the lawyers and even kept saying how he was in the wrong and he was lying because I told him to. Her argument was the lawyer should have mentioned this house in the previous reading, and the fact that he was mentioned this days later was very, very suspicious. The lawyer responded to her and told her that the reason he took a few days on this because they had to make sure if the house was under my dad's name or not, because it belonged to my mom and her family before that. That confirmation was important because it was a legal matter, and he did not want to put me in a situation where I had to give the house back in case it wasn't in my dad's name. Bailey was not a fan at all of this response because she stormed out of his office and I had to apologize to the lawyer for the fuss that she created in such a proper place. I was embarrassed, but I left as well. The entire car ride back home, Bailey was trying to convince me to give her the house we currently live in because it was, quote, incredibly selfish to keep them both to myself. I tried ignoring her as best as I could, but she continued it even when we went home. And honestly, at that point, I had enough of her selfish, whiny behavior. The only reason she was in this mess in the first place was because she could not keep her hands to herself and just wanted to ruin everything. It's night now, and I think she's asleep. Thank the heavens, because I cannot deal with any more of her whines today, especially after already screaming at her once and telling her that I was not going to give her a single penny, so it's better if she used her energy to find a job or a place to live. Update number 3. 1 week is finally over. This was honestly one of the hardest weeks of my entire life because of Bailey, and I'm so overwhelmed with everything that I legit felt like I was going to go insane. Especially because, if you guys have not figured it out yet, Bailey was definitely not going to leave the house without creating a ruckus. I should have expected it, honestly. Firstly, she spent the entire week trying to convince me to help her out because she had nowhere to go, and she did not want to stay with the guy that she had a baby with because he lived in a tiny apartment, and she did not think that she could fit in well there. At first, I gave in because I started feeling bad for her. She's pretty good at emotional blackmail, so she knows exactly which strings to pull to make someone agree with you. I almost agreed with her, but then I remembered how she'd tell my father that I needed more beatings to knock some sense into me. That's when I decided that I would not help her no matter how emotional she gets. Then she told me that she had a lawyer friend as well, and she could easily ask him for a favor and have me give in some of the goods that I inherited from Dad. She was basically threatening me and telling me that she was going to make me give it up somehow, but I knew it was all bullcrap because her hands were shaking when she said it, and that always happens when she's bluffing. Third, and the thing that made me the most mad, was that she stole from me, or, well, she tried to. On the 7th day, I told her to pack everything she needed because I did not want her in the house the next morning. She seemed very pouty, but she did not put up a fight even though I expected her to. I mean, she was fighting me all week. Then an hour passed away and she still did not appear in the living room. I didn't think much of it because I thought she must have a lot to pack, so I let her be. But then I wanted water, and now, to go to the kitchen you have to cross her room. When I went into the hallway that had her room in it, which led to the kitchen, I noticed her door open. She was stuffing all my gold jewelry and cash into her suitcase. I knew I had to get her caught red-handed because she would find a way to get out of the situation. That's why I quickly grabbed my phone and recorded her stuffing everything into the bag and looking frantic. Then I proceeded to call the police, and while waiting for them to arrive, I decided to confront her. At first, she was denying it, and I let her. I wanted to see the look on her face when I showed the video to the police. And boy, did it not disappoint. She was shell-shocked by the entire situation, and because the police had enough proof, they decided to arrest her. As they were dragging her out of the house, I made sure to let her know that she should never try any tricks with me because I come back and I come back stronger each time. Final updates. My mom went to jail for 4 to 6 months, and I'm not exactly sure. I wasn't keeping track because I just wanted her out of my house and out of my life as soon as possible. Once that was done and she was away, I had no interest in keeping up with what she's been doing. Who knows, maybe somebody bailed her out or something. I'm not sure how this works, and besides, I'm pretty sure she doesn't really have anyone to rely on because she messes up every relationship she's in. Anyways, even though I really wanted to keep her away from me and never interact with her ever again, she showed up at my house 2 weeks ago. Apparently, she got out of jail and now did not have anywhere to go. Daniel was also with the guy, but he wasn't taking Bailey in anymore because he did not trust her enough to know that she would not steal anything from him. She told me all of this when she came crying and begging on my doorstep, asking me to let her stay in the house or to give her some of the shares from the property and everything that I inherited so that she could, quote, make her life and live in peace. Why would I help her get peace when she made me spend 3 years of my life in chaos and made me stay on the edge of my seat because I never knew when one of them would get off on me? She didn't deserve my help at all, so I told her to get lost. I told her I would not help her at all because I felt no pity or anything against her. All I felt towards her was a hatred, and if I acted on it, I could do so many worse things to make her life miserable. But I don't because I don't want to get into that. I want to keep my life peaceful, and all Bailey does is ruin it. She kept showing up at my house because she had to live in this very tiny attic-type space that, according to her, did not even have space for more than 3 people at the same time. Bailey claimed that she'd do anything to make me forgive her, but she wants to stay in the house with me. I was so frustrated with her and her actions that I threatened her. I will call the cops. I told her that she needs to leave me alone or I was going to call the police and file a restraining order against her, because she already had such a terrible experience with me calling the cops. She got scared and left. It's between a while and 2 weeks, and she still has not shown up, so I'm taking it as a win and assuming that I scared her off enough to make sure she doesn't show up in my life again. Well, anyways, guys, that's it.
Wow, guys, what a story. I want to hear from you guys about this one specific question. Can you guys even put yourself in these shoes? If the father in today's story did not take OP seriously and just give OP a chance to explain everything, well, then I think the outcome of this story would have been a lot different. But before the father passed, he changed the will, and the rest was history. Guys, drop your thoughts down below in the comment section. I would love to talk to you guys about today's story. So, someone just stole my boyfriend. And by the way, I'm one of the most successful wedding planners in my city. So guess what? They came back to me after they stole my boyfriend a few months later and asked me to plan their wedding. Well, you know what? Sure, I'll plan it.
Life puts you in the worst case scenarios when you least expect it. Well, that's what happened to me when I found out that my stepmom apparently just stole my boyfriend. I lost my mind when I saw that woman kissing my boyfriend a few weeks back. I didn't think twice. I went and yanked her head back. I threw her across the room and she landed on the couch. Well, I then grabbed the platter of sushi that was on his desk and threw it at him. He smelled like sushi for the rest of the day. She, on the other hand, was laughing her butt off, and she told me that she actually set me up so that I would catch them. Yeah, that's right. Well, she wanted me to. So, she tried leaving hints, but I just went ahead to trust my boyfriend way too much. So, the only thing left to do was for me to catch my boyfriend in the act. I was boiling on the inside, and I was also very hurt. But I did not show it on the outside. I would never give her the satisfaction of knowing that she hurt me that deeply. She could see my anger, and I did not mind it. But when it came to my sadness and hurt, she would not see any of it. I looked at my boyfriend and told him to explain. Well, that cocky player just smiled and said the cat was out of the bag. Then I asked him how he could do this to me, and he told me that he could, and besides, she was less whiny than me. He then went on to tell me that intimacy with her was much better than with me. So the gist of it was that he preferred her over me. I told them that they deserved each other and it would hurt each other. They were both toxic and narcissistic, and the fact that I still had them in my life proved that I didn't love myself enough. My boyfriend's been putting me through hell for years, yet I stayed. My stepmother has been horrible when my father was still alive. He left my trust in her name, and since I've not gotten married yet, I can't access it. I was waiting to turn 30 so it would go into my name. Woe is me for expecting Jeremy to propose to me. My friends told me to leave him a long time ago. They told me he didn't love me and was not loyal. but I believed that he could change for me. You see, he was just a tortured soul and was soft on the inside. It turns out I was wrong. I mean, come on, he was a piece of garbage. As for my stepmother, this was on brand for her. My father's been barely dead for 8 months, and she's already hopping into bed with the nearest guy. You best believe I gave her my peace of mind, and after that I left and went to the apartment that I shared with him. The lease was in my name since I was paying the rent most of the time. He was broke and always losing his gigs, and he was always telling me that the next good gig would come and he would hit it big. Well, I stupidly believed him, but slowly I started to realize that the big break was never going to come. I packed all his clothing and put them in a garbage bag. I then left them outside the bin room, knowing fully well that the bins were being taken the next day. I texted him to make sure to be there before 5 a.m. Otherwise, his clothing was going to be disposed of, and I switched off my phone, went to my friend's apartment, and we opened a bottle of wine. We actually celebrated the fact that the leech was out of my life. He was now my stepmother's problem, and you know the greatest part? She had no idea how bad he was. He always acted like a good boyfriend in front of my parents, and they thought that he was responsible, good-looking, and kind. I saw the way that she looked at him the very first time that she saw him, but I knew that she would never cross that line. I guess now that my father was out of the way, there was nothing stopping her. The next couple of days passed by in a haze, and the emotions that I've been keeping in began to pour out. As soon as I got home, I threw myself into bed and I cried. I just could not believe that those two people would do this to me. So, soon enough, I stopped crying and I decided to move on with my life. I now had more time to dedicate to my business. This breakup actually came at a good time for me, and I was not making enough money to keep my business open and to pay my bills. But once my team was freed up, I was now able to take on more clients. As much as I loved life, it sucked. I mean, my love life was garbage. I thought I would finally get my professional life back on track, but I guess that won't be happening anytime soon. So, just yesterday, I found out that my assistant had approved a client without my consent. First of all, I signed the documents without knowing who this client was, and I was so busy that sometimes I sent her to do the consultations. So when my stepmother entered my office to discuss her upcoming weddings, I was absolutely livid. I told her to get out of my office and go where the sun does not shine. I told her that people like her were not welcome in my business. How dare she just ask me to plan her wedding to my ex-boyfriend? Did she think that I was crazy, or did she think that I was pathetic? I told her there was no galaxy in this world where I would plan that wedding. She laughed and said that she needed her deposit back, and not only that, but she was going to take me to court for breach of contract. I asked what she meant by that, and that's when she took out the documents that proved that I agreed to take her as a client. So I called my assistant to confirm this, and I did not remember accepting this woman as a client. When my assistant showed me my signature on those papers, I lost it. I asked her how she could let this slip, and she told me that she has no idea that this woman was someone that I did not want to work with. I told her that I would deal with her later. Now that I was alone with my stepmother, I told her that we needed to cancel the contract. I could give her the deposit back as well. Well, she went ahead to just tell me that she did not want to cancel the contract. So, despite our past, I was one of the best in the city. So I had a style that she wanted at her wedding. She wanted to be a happy bride, and if it meant asking her ex's ex to plan it, then you know what, so be it. She hopes that I can be a mature adult and plan the wedding for her. Well, I told her to get out unless she was willing to sign the cancellation. She told me that she's tried to get me to do this the easy way. If she has to force me to plan the wedding, okay, she'll do that. She then left me to my own devices. I was shaking, quivering with anger even and frustration. Could she not let me move on with my life? I mean, did she really have to throw it in my face? She got him to propose to her within just moments, and I've been asking this man to marry me for 3 years, and he keeps on saying that the ring is coming. What sort of spell was she using? It had to be a money thing. That was the only reason that he would agree to be tied down. I never told him that I had a trust fund because I knew that he would squander my money. I could have warned him. Well, but I had no loyalty left to her. She was going to find out on her own what that man was, and he's trash. So once I calmed down and I spoke to my assistant, she did not have good news for me. She let me know that we had somehow spent the deposit on something else, and if we decided to pay my stepmother back, we would end up in debt. We were barely scraping by, as it appeared, and she told me that honestly, I needed this contract, and she said that even though I hated this woman, I had to do it for the money. That left me with a lot to think about, and I'm between a rock and a hard place right now. Do I take my chances and give her back her money, even if it puts my business at risk? Do I work with her and endure agony every second of the way? I'm sure that she's just doing this to throw it at my face, and she does not have any shame. If my father could see her right now, he would be so disappointed. I wish that I could go back in time and tell my dad not to marry her. When I found out he was getting married to her, I was supportive. It's been too long since my mom left him and just, felt like he deserved love. When I saw my stepmother, I decided not to judge a book by its cover. She looked like a gold digger, and I should have known she was one. So many things that I could have changed, and yet here I am. So, what do you think I should do? Do you think I should plan the wedding or not? This could be my chance to get revenge. I've never been one for revenge, but I know what it does to people. But I don't know. I've been severely humiliated, and everyone pities me because she stole my boyfriend. So imagine how they're going to react when they find out that she's getting married to him. What would you do if you guys were in my position? Let me know. What's up, everybody? Mr. Reddito here. I hope you guys are having a fantastic day. And oh boy, today's story is about to go nuclear. I do have a few updates, and I hope you guys are enjoying your day. If you're new to the channel, my name's Mr. Reddito, and I narrate stories every single day. So consider subscribing for daily videos, and guys, let's jump into update 1 out of 7. Update number 1. It's 2 weeks later. A couple of days ago, I was forced to go on with the wedding preparations. I had to do a consultation with both bride and the groom. It was my first time seeing my ex since I threw his stuff out. I managed to keep my cool, but barely. They were insufferable, and I wanted to tell them to get a room, but I couldn't. See, in my line of work, I always have to be professional. I have no choice but to take this contract unless I want to financially ruin myself. So I'm going to take the contract and give her a wedding that she's never going to forget. All that she's done for me is going to be my motivation for this wedding. She's going to wish that she never asked me to plan her wedding in the first place, and the best part is that she's never going to be able to get me punished for this in any way. I'm going to ruin her big day in such a way that she'll never forget it. She's going to cry, and, you best believe me when I say that when I see her with him, all of that work I've done comes undone. I'm haunted by the day I found them together, and I just want to kick them out of my office. Instead, I have to smile at them and ask them about color schemes. She's very smug and proud of herself for scoring a boy toy. She had dressed him up in fancy clothing, and it's a pity that no matter how much you dress rubbish, it still is garbage. She parades around him in town like a pet. It's sickening, and I've heard a lot of people actually find it repulsing. But she does not care because she's so in love with him. I don't blame her because I too was once a fool for this man. He also put me under the spell, and I felt like the only girl in the world. The day I found out it was not true, my whole world shattered. And he still finds a way to hurt me every single day. I'm dreading the next appointment, which was in a couple of days, and I'm dreading picking up a wedding dress for her. I'm dreading helping her pick up what kind of food she's going to have at her wedding. I want someone to wake me up and tell me that this is all just a terrible dream. But I know that no such thing is going to happen. So I'm just going to carry on running. It's a new hobby that I've taken up recently, and I'm often not able to sleep. So I usually run around the block a couple times until I'm too tired to carry on. Only then am I able to sleep, and yes, it helps to clear my mind, and for a while, I don't feel too terrible. It's the only therapy that I can actually afford. Update number 2. Hey, it's me, and I'm feeling so much better after today. Well, in fact, I've been laughing all day long. Every time that I have a spare minute, I think of what happened today, and I absolutely love it. My stepmom really thought that she had me good. Now she regrets having me plan her wedding, and the wedding is only, a couple weeks away, and she's panicking. But before I get into it, I want to respond to some comments. A user told me to stop pursuing revenge, because it was only going to hurt me and my business. Well, thank you for your concern. So, over the past few months, I've been rectifying my financial issues. And even if I had to give her back her money, I'll be fine. I also have someone willing to lend me some money till I'm A-okay. This is very important for me and much more important than money. One of the comments is one that I cannot get out of my head, guys. The comment is from someone who has actually been through something similar. For her, it was her stepsister and her fiancé who betrayed her just days before the wedding. They ended up having a child together, and she was just forced to accept it by her family. I know why you're paying, which is why I'm thankful for your support. Hell yeah, I'm going to make them pay. In fact, I've already made my stepmom pay, and I'm sure that you're dying to find out how I did this exactly. As I was planning her wedding, I got an understanding of exactly what she wanted. So, yeah, well, I got to the opposite of what she wanted. She was so ignorant that she didn't even notice. She just went ahead to sign off on everything without even looking at it. She was also so blinded by her pride in making me plan the wedding, but the worst blow of all came in the venue that I got for her. She wanted to have her wedding in a very specific hall. A lot of wealthy people in the community have had their weddings there. It's definitely the most sought-after place, and there's a main hall, which is the most popular, and there's also a smaller hall. See, she wanted to have a bigger wedding, but I got her the smaller hall. At this point, I did not even care if she sued me. I just wanted her to lose her mind. This came sooner than later when she decided that she was going to do a viewing of her venue. See, my assistant went with her as I was busy on that day. She then called me hours later telling me that my stepmom lost it. She's been arguing with the manager. She was convinced that she had booked the big hall when in fact she booked the small hall. She then proceeded to have a mental breakdown. She tried to convince the manager to change the booking, but the day was already double booked. She then came home, storming into my office just as I was about to leave. She told me that I was crazy and jealous, and she said that she deserved to move on with her life. Just because my father was dead, it did not mean that she could not find love. I said that I totally agreed with her. But what was her point? She's the one who approved of the small hall. It wasn't my fault. She told me that I should have warned her and made her double check. Well, I told her that she was a grown woman and she could do that on her own. I needed to leave for the day, so I told her to make an appointment and speak to me the next day. She refused and decided to even threaten me. Well, I told her that my assistant was recording all of this, and unless she wanted to spend the night in jail, she better leave. Well, when she left, she bombarded my phone with many text messages. She called me names and incompetent, and she told me that she was going to tell everyone in the city not to use my services. I told her to try her best, but my work spoke for itself. Besides, in the contract, it says that she had the final say when it came to everything. How was it my fault that she did not double-check? I've been laughing at her reaction for the whole day, guys, and satisfaction from knowing that her perfect days are going to be not so perfect after all is like no other. Besides, what did she expect? Did she think I was gonna plan a fairy tale wedding for her? Come on, that's just being stupid. Well, I'll update you guys. Update number 3. I'm officially no longer my stepmother's wedding planner. Well, thank goodness, because I was getting so tired of dealing with her. In addition to that, I'm not invited to the wedding. It's not like I was planning on going anywho. She did get most of her money back though, but I'll be fine. For my actions, there were many consequences, and some people got wind of the rumors that I sabotaged her wedding. The only thing that I could say was that there was a great misunderstanding between her and me. Some clients have been skeptical about continuing their services with me. Now that I've calmed down, I'm starting to realize how serious the situation is. However, we move, and I did what I had to do to avenge myself. Now we're even, and I don't have to deal with her anymore. Now it's time for me to implant some strategies that will help me to mitigate the cost. I do like a bit of problem solving, so don't worry about me. It was all worth it to see her lose her mind. Guys, she's never gonna get that perfect wedding at this rate, and it's just too short of a notice for her dream wedding planner. And the fact that I'm banned is just the cherry on top. Well, I have to go. Apparently, there's a woman who's harassing my assistant, and she does not have an appointment and is demanding to see me. Let me find out what she wants. If it's my stepmom again, I swear I'm calling the cops. Update. I should definitely invest in pepper spray. It appears that I'm not safe in the city. I'm the most wanted person, and there's a bounty on my head even. Well, I'm joking. Let me explain, though. Last week, when there was this crazy woman who wanted to talk to me in my office, I went and checked who it was, and to my surprise, it was the last person I wanted to see. The mother of my gaslighting, cheating, lying, stealing idiot ex. If you think that he's a psycho, well, she's worse. She's the boss level of psycho, and this woman helped her son to gaslight and to make me feel worthless. She was also a coddling mother and never allowed him to take responsibility for his actions. And now she was in my office because she had a bone to pick with me. She tried to attack me without using her words, and guys, it was extremely funny and unsuccessful. Firstly, I'm much fitter than her. Those running sessions have done wonders for my strength, and I told her that I was either going to call the police or make an example of her and just send her to her son, bruised. I think then I asked her what she wanted. She then told me to stay away from her son because my obsession was pathetic, and I told her I didn't want her cheating son. She told me that if I've been a good girlfriend, he would not have needed to cheat. Besides, at least he was marrying somebody who could take care of him, and I told her that if she did not have anything else to say, then she should leave. Well, she claimed that she knew some very dangerous people and that they would make mincemeat of me. I didn't take her serious because she was just a clown like her son. So I asked her what she knew about her daughter-in-law, and she said the woman was rich. I mean, what else does she need to know? I laughed at her stupidity, and I asked her what made her think that my stepmother was going to allow her to dip her toes into the funds. I've known this woman for years. She would not allow such a thing. I even then proceeded to tell her that she was slowly going to start losing her son. My stepmother would be the only woman who had power over him. He was going to stop visiting her and supporting her, and she told me that I was lying and I was just jealous. And then I asked her if she was not jealous. This woman was going to spend most of her time with her son, and she was already changing a sense of dressing, and what else was she going to change? And then asked how she felt about the fact that they were actually going to move to another state. I must admit that this was a lie. No one told me such a thing, and when I told her this, I noticed that the wheels in her head were just starting to turn like a hamster wheel. After years of knowing her, I knew exactly how to rile her up. You know what? She might have been crazy, right? But she loved her son. She thought that I was going to take him away, and she hated me. Imagine how she was going to react when she found out that this woman planned to take her son further away from her than I did. I then added fuel to the fire by saying that I've seen the number of an old age home in my stepmother's diary when I, was helping her plan the wedding. My stepmom's in her 40s, and she has no reason to be going to an old age home, but Badger's main mom is 60. She had him when she was really old and convinced that she would never have children. So yes, I admit that I was gaslighting her. It was only fair after her son had been playing with my mind for years. I must say that I've learned many tricks, one of which is to use the opponent's fear to get whatever you want from them. For I was not done with my stepmother. She cost me too much business in the first place, and so then my crazy, nearly mother-in-law left. The look in her eyes revealed to me that she was cooking something up. I could not wait to see what she had in store for him. Updates. Guess who just called me to ask me for my help? Yep, my nearly ex-mother-in-law, you guessed it. She wants me to help her with dirt on my stepmom. She absolutely hates the woman, and she claims that my stepmom tried to bribe her with money and gifts. But she sees right through her act. She apparently had dinner with my stepmom a couple of days before the wedding, and during dinner she observed my stepmother and decided that she did not like her. She also found out that my stepmom has no plans of having kids or adopting them, and that was the final straw. Can you believe that she said she wished her son had not broken up with me? At least I was more agreeable and actually wanted to have kids with her boy. What she meant was that I was docile. I went along with everything that she and her son wanted, and I knew that if I did not, then they would, going to make my life a living hell. I did not let her false compliments get to me. I just told her what she needed to hear about my mom. It was just regular dirt about her, how she messed over most of her friends, and how I suspected she was cheating on Dad when he was alive. That was why I was hell-bent on making sure that her wedding day was ruined. Now, I can't wait to see what happens next. Update. Breaking news. The wedding did not go on. I've just watched a video where my stepmom and Jeremy's mom were fighting. This ended in a fight and the police being called, and they're currently being held for questioning. What I do know is that my stepmom called off the wedding to Jeremy. It's kind of hard to marry somebody whose mom tried to burn your hair. Well, that's right, Jeremy's mom and stepmom have not been getting along. They've apparently been butting heads for several days now, and she even tried to get Jeremy's mom uninvited from the wedding, but failed. Jeremy's mom did not take kindly to this, and she snuck into the suite where my stepmom was getting her hair done and makeup done, and that's when she tried to burn my stepmom's hair. She disguised herself as the hairdresser, and then she used synthetic hair extensions right there on my stepmother's hair, and then used a hair straightener. Apparently, my stepmother realized that something was wrong because there was smoke and crackling, and she then tussled with Jeremy's mom. The fight ended up in the corridors. My stepmom then decided that enough was enough, and Jeremy had to make a decision, so she went and barged into his room. One of the bridesmaids made sure to catch all this on camera. She confronted Jeremy, who defended his mom. She would not hear anything about it, so then she decided to dump him. She continued to go back and forth with his mom until the fight turned physical. Well, the guests were absolutely puzzled, and when an hour after the starting time no one showed up, no one ever showed up to the wedding because it was over. Called off. Well, what can I say? The Lord works in mysterious ways, and wonderful ways that were much deserved. Jimmy's mom is crazy. She actually wanted to burn my stepmom's hair, and I wish that she had actually managed to do it, to be honest. I'm so tempted to go to the station right now just to see how she looks, and I'm sure she's livid right now. I guess I'll just take a back seat and enjoy the drama. Final update. Hey guys, I'm back. It's been some months since I last wrote, but guess who got her inheritance from her greedy stepmother? No, I did not get married, but I turned 30, which is the other clause in my father's will. I've been counting on this to finally get me my inheritance, and it'll definitely help with my finances, but I'm not going to bore you with that. I need to tell you some other stuff. My stepmother was more than embarrassed after she got, not married. She had a huge mental breakdown, and she was not the same after that, and she hardly left the house. I also heard that she has a fear of hairdressers now, and every time that I've seen her, it's quite obvious that she has done her own hair. It looks rather tragic. So my ex tried to get back with me. He claims that he was ready to change and be the man I needed. I waited for him to be the man I needed for 3 long years, and did he really think that I was this stupid? I kicked him to the curb and refused to allow him to stay with me. He couch surfed for a while, and the last I knew he was cohabiting with some druggies. When I asked him why his mother did not take him in, he told me that her new boyfriend did not allow it. Oh, the irony and how it's lost upon me. She had the nerve to interfere in his love life, but did not allow him to be anywhere near hers. Smart woman, otherwise she would die single. So she basically came to break off his engagement and make him lose out on spending my stepmom's money. It's more than thrills me that none of these 3 got what they wanted. So my stepmom did not get married, and, well, he and his mom did not get the money, and I got to walk away unscathed without even doing much.
My father just passed away in a very unfortunate accident. He got into a big argument with my stupid stepmother, and he stormed out of the house, and in a rage of fury, he was driving down the back mountain roads when it was pouring down rain, and I guess his anger must have got the best of him because he crashed. And he ended up in a coma, and he didn't make it. But that's not what today's story is about. That's just what led to what happened next. My stepmother is now trying to take my inheritance that he left for me. She's trying to get me kicked out of the house that I grew up in, and the only person in this entire world that can stop her is me.
I'm 17 years of age and my life is temporarily in the hands of my stepmother. This is my father's doing, but I don't resent him for it. I'm the only child of my parents who have passed away. My mother used to be a medical consultant in a big eye clinic while my father had a delivery company, which he had toiled for most part of his life to build. My parents were satisfied with just having a child, and though I sometimes wish that I had another sibling whom I could experience life together with, I'm equally grateful to my parents for dedicating all their lives to loving me. Well, life happens, and it happened to us. My mother, she passed away 3 years ago from a heart attack. The tragic loss of my mother hit my dad and me pretty hard. To say that we were devastated would be an understatement. It was during that period that I saw my stepmother. She was one of the sympathizers, and you would be surprised to hear that she used to be my late mother's colleagues. She sort of hung around after the funeral, and she tried to warm her way into my father's heart. I don't think my father loved her to start with because he never recovered from my mother's death, till he went to join her. You see, my father listened to the advice of some friends who advised him to settle down for at least my sake, as he needed a wife and I needed a mother. If only we could see the future when we would have probably dodged the human bullet, aka my stepmother, Madeline. My father asked Madeline to marry him, but he clearly told her that he was not willing to have kids and he knew how important it was to her, since she did not have a child of her own. Madeline said that spending the rest of her life beside my father as his wife was the only thing that mattered to her, and I think that's utter lies. The marriage happened, and it was a small affair. There was no such thing as a honeymoon because the house, became hot right after the wedding. Now, I'm a girl in her teens, and even though I love and respect my parents, they equally accorded me a level of respect and freedom, and everyone got along just fine. But the moment my stepmother got into the picture, she wanted my father to choke the life out of me. She attempted to stir him up so that he would deny me certain privileges which have been given to me all my life. Thankfully, though, my father was never one to be manipulated so easily. Madeline was actually the person who had told my father to cancel their wedding trip, as she claimed that it was an unnecessary reason to spend money. You might praise her for doing that on the basis that she was trying to help him save money, right? But I strongly disagree. Let me tell you why. My father was doing his best to move on after losing his first wife, and if Madeline was sensitive enough, she would have known that a getaway trip was what my father needed at that moment. I kept my opinion to myself and did not interfere in their marriage, but that did not stop my stepmother from getting on my toes the very next day. I was in the house when the cleaner, who comes twice a week, showed up for work. She was about to start working when my stepmom walked in and asked her to leave. The cleaner looked at me with a surprised facade, and though I could not put a finger on why Madeline was asking the cleaner to leave, I asked her to come back the next day or some other time. The cleaner turned back to get her things and leave when Madeline told her that her services were no longer needed to be done. Neither the cleaner nor I understood what was going on, and we looked at her for a bit more clearance. You see, Madeline repeated what she said and emphasized that the cleaner services would no longer be needed. I felt that she wanted to take up the chores all by herself, so I told her that it was going to be too much on her, especially even if she could cope. It was too soon for her to start worrying about chores when her attention was supposed to be on my father. Madeline immediately looked at me like I was joking, and she said that she would rather die than lift a pin. I was confused and asked why she just fired the cleaner then, who had been lifting pins in the house on a weekly basis. Madeline said the cleaner was fired because I'm old enough to handle the chores around the home. It was a shocker, which I found disrespectful, and I did not hide my faults. I'm not lazy or whatever, but there was no way I would do the whole thing which the cleaner did. So I told my stepmom that there's no way on this earth that it was going to happen, and she began to raise her voice at me. I told her to quit shouting at me, as I found it disrespectful and would not take it from her, but she only increased her tone. Well, my father rushed out to see what was going on, and Madeline immediately began to tell him how badly he and my late mother had raised me. I've been trying to not be disrespectful. All the while she thundered, but the moment she brought my mother into the scene, well, I talked back to her and said that she knew nothing about child training and she never had a child of her own. Madeline attempted to slap me, but my father got in between us and he asked me to never disrespect his wife anymore and demanded that I go into my room. Well, as I stormed into my room, I could hear my stepmom nagging about how my father, rather than properly discipline me for disrespecting her, had just let me off the hook. My father, he comes into my room later that evening and had a lengthy chit-chat. He told me that he had told his wife to learn to live with and love me. He told me that he was not going to turn his back on me simply because he had remarried, but he pleaded that I equally learn to tolerate my stepmom as she was his wife, and disrespecting her meant that I was indirectly disrespecting him. I promised my father I would do my utmost best not to make trouble in the house, but noted that he equally needs to talk to his wife to respect my boundaries. My father noted that he had done so and the cleaner was going to be retained. The drama which took place the day after my father's wedding was the first of many. Madeline held on to what I had said that day about her not knowing anything about raising a child, because she did not have any children of her own, and she began to disturb my father about adopting a baby. As you can imagine, this caused a serious issue between them because my father had earlier noted that he was done with childbearing. Madeline had earlier claimed that spending the rest of her life beside my father as his wife was all that mattered to her, so why was she so intent on adopting a child simply because of something which I said during our argument? Well, guys, Madeline continued to raise dust about the child adoption issue, and she even started the adoption process without my father giving his consent. This action made my dad mad, and it was the first time that I had ever seen my father this angry. They seriously argued that afternoon, and my father just had to storm out of the house to avoid hitting her. Yeah, I witnessed all the drama, but I did not interfere. It was 20 minutes after my father had left the house that we received a call to rush down to the hospital where my father was admitted. He just got into an accident. My stepmother and I put our differences aside and rushed down to the hospital where my father was found comatose. The moment I saw my father in such a state of unconsciousness, I wanted to attack my stepmom right then and there, because if she had not gone behind him to initiate the adoption process, then they would not have argued, and he would not be in the hospital. Things did not get better when my dad has passed on 3 days later. I lack the words to describe my feelings at this point. Only one person is to be blamed for my father's untimely death, and that person is Madeline. He died just a few months after his wedding, and my father's funeral took place later than it was supposed to, and this was because Madeline wanted it so. He's been buried 2 days after his death, but Madeline had the funeral fixed for 2 months later. I asked her why my father's funeral was taking so much time, and she said it's on purpose, because she wants to honor my father's dying wish. I did not understand what she meant because my father never said a word once he got into a coma, so where did the dying wish thing come from? Well, I mean, what could a 17-year-old do anyways? I just allowed Madeline to go ahead and do her thing. After all, she was the legal wife to my father. My father's funeral, it finally took place, and I saw the reason why Madeline had delayed it all. She attended my father's funeral with a 2-year-old boy, and flaunted him as their adopted baby. And her late husband, well, according to her, she and my father had begun the adoption process before he died. She claimed that she was honoring him by going ahead to fulfill his wish even though he was no more. Sympathizers, including my grandparents who had come from the countryside to witness the funeral of their son, fell for the story. But I did not. There was no way all she was saying could be true because my father's death came as a result of her wanting to adopt a child. Just after we paid our respect to my father's memory, Madeline got so interested in the reading of the will. The will was read last week, and Madeline was present with my father's 2-year-old dying wish, Jackson. The lawyer started off by announcing that my stepmom had received an amount of $10,000 from my dad. She was not happy with the amount, well, and she did not say anything yet until the lawyer was done reading. Well, he did not read for long, as he had said that every other thing which my father had left behind was mine, even though she would be my guardian who would oversee it till I became of legal age, and the legal age is 18, a year from now. Well, Madeline challenged what the lawyer had read, and she said that there was no way only I could get everything when I had a brother. She demanded that what was given to me be split in half between my stepbrother and I. And if the lawyer had said anything to support her, I would have just argued with both of them right there. The lawyer thankfully noted that my stepmother's demands could not be met, because there was no mention of Jackson in the will, but Madeline was not going to have it, guys. She claimed that my father had in mind, to include his son in the will once he came out of hospital care, and that he would only be honoring him by splitting my inheritance. The lawyer, however, noted that her ridiculous demands could not be met, and Madeline started to create a scene like the madwoman that she is. I could not understand the nonsense, so I asked her to quit wasting her time, because simply neither her nor her son, who by the way I don't consider to be my stepbrother, was going to get more than they had gotten. Madeline was obviously mad at me, but I did not give her the luxury of physically abusing me, so I just went into my room and shut the door. She asked the lawyer to leave the home and threatened to take the case to court, but the lawyer, before leaving, noted that the case would not stand a second in chance of winning in court. It's been 3 weeks since the whole incident, and Jackson no longer stays with us. I've not bothered to ask Madeline because I don't care anyways, but I believe that the only reason why she had brought the boy into our lives in the first place was that she could use him to get a share of my father's property in case she was not made the sole heir. I don't know what's become of that boy, but I'm sure that my stepmom is too selfish to adopt a child and raise a child based on her own money, because if she could, she would have done so a long time ago before getting married to my father. Just like I mentioned earlier, guys, my life is temporarily in her hands as she is the custodian of my property. This is something she used to make my life hell about recently. Madeline has slashed the monthly allowance which I got by 70%, and she's even subjected me to doing the chores at home. She's gotten herself involved in every aspect of my life, and the way that this is going, it'll not be long before I would need her permission to even breathe. This is something that I'm not used to, and I'm very sure that we will soon be having a series of drama between us. So right now, guys, I just need some advice, I really do, because I don't know how to handle this situation. Like, what am I even supposed to do now? Anybody who knows or maybe has an idea how I can handle this, please let me know in the comments. Update number 1. Hey guys, I'm back with an update. Well, first of all, it's been a few months since I've been living with my stepmom, and guess what? I've been indirectly thrown out of my own parents' home. Yep, that's right, thrown out. And I currently live with my grandparents. I recently have graduated from high school, and my friends and I plan to celebrate. We had agreed that we would go clubbing, and I needed some money. The only way that I was going to get some money from my stepmom was if I gave her a detailed account of what I needed it for, so there was no need to even lie. She's been making my life miserable for me ever since she's made the custodian of my inheritance, and though I already knew that she would not give me a dime to go party with my friends, I decided, you know what? I'll at least try. When I asked Madeline about it, well, she asked for the grades which I graduated with, and though I did not graduate the top of my class, I was not the last either, but that did not matter to Madeline. See, she claimed that my results was bad, and rather than thinking about creative ways in which I could make something useful out of my life, I was busy looking for money from her to go off and party. Madeline verbally tore me to shreds, and I stood without saying a word. I had tried to not get into fights with her ever since she became my custodian because it would only make my life more miserable for me than it already was. It was clear that she was not going to give me the money, but she could have just said so, rather than first tear me to shreds. She just declared that I was not going, as she won't give me a dime, and that's when my rebellious side really hit me. I told her that I was not going to miss the party for anything in the world, and she threatened to throw me out of the house if I went ahead to a party. I snuck out of the house on the night of the party, and my girls and I, we went really wild. It was during that night that I drove a car for the first time in my life. Well, I drove a car and it almost cost me my leg because I was involved in an accident. We were 4 ladies in the vehicle, and though none of us lost our lives, we sustained serious injuries. We were rushed to the hospital by the parents of one of us, and I was immediately sedated because of the pain I was going through. I woke up the next morning and I was asked about how to reach my guardian, and I didn't know what to do, because I simply did not want to tell my stepmom to be contacted, but as I had absolutely no other option, I called Madeline. Madeline did not even show up at the hospital for another 3 days, and when she did, she behaved just like I knew she would. My stepmom walked inside the ward where the nurses were, changing the bandages of my leg, and she just went ahead to scold me. The nurses tried to calm her down by noting that the main focus should be on my recovery, but Madeline said that whether I recovered or not was my business. She emphasized the fact that I had broken my leg because I was too stubborn to heed her instructions. My friend's father, the one who had rushed to the hospital, came into the ward and introduced himself to my stepmom. Madeline immediately began to tell him how sorry she was that I had damaged his car and put the lives of his daughters and the other girls at risk. She made it look like I was to blame for the entire thing, and I get that I was the one who damaged the car, but Madeline painted the picture of me being a bad influence to the other girls and claimed that I was responsible for the girls wanting to go out to the club in the first place. She said that she tried her best to make me take my life seriously ever since my father died, but I was actively frustrating her efforts. She, however, thanked the man for saving my life. Madeline did not say any kind things to me throughout the period while I was admitted to the hospital. On the day when I was about to be discharged, she came with a driver to pick me up, and as soon as I sat in the car, I knew that we were not going home. On our way there, she called me a deadweight that needed to be disposed of because she would not spend her precious time looking after me. Well, after about an hour's journey, the car finally parked at my grandparents' home in the countryside, and the driver began to bring out my things from the booth. I was obviously surprised, and my grandparents were surprised to see me walking with the aid of clutches, and after they had gotten us settled into the house, Madeline started afresh to verbally tear me to shreds. When she was done, she told my grandparents that the house where we lived was undergoing renovation, and it would not be conducive for me, so that's why she was bringing me over there temporarily to stay with them. Well, I knew it was nothing more than an utter lie because Madeline had clearly called me a deadweight. My grandparents welcomed the idea of nursing me back to health, and that's how my stepmom dumped me at my grandparents' place. I'm patiently waiting till I recover and turn 18 so that I can have my inheritance and this woman can be out of my life for good. Update number 2. Hey guys, I'm back with an update, so I know it's been too long since my last one, but guess what? My stepmother, Madeline, is currently in need of a deadweight, which she had discarded almost a year ago. I don't think that I stressed how hurt I was that my stepmother was pushing me out of my own house without me having a say about it. She claimed that the renovation only was going on as the time, but this was almost a year now, and yesterday was the first time she picked up her phone to reach out to me. Her call was not because she wanted to check on me. It was for her own personal interest, guys, can you believe it? I was surprised when my phone rang yesterday and I discovered that my stepmother was the one on the line. She asked how I was faring. Well, I'm completely whole and I just turned 18, so I told her I'm great. She then said that she was calling not just to check up on me, but to ask what I came to her aid for, as it was a matter of emergency. I was curious, just as you are now, to know what this matter of urgency was that she's talking about, even though I knew that I would not help her. Madeline said that she was recently involved in an accident herself and she suffered some broken ribs. I didn't sympathize with her, but that was me simply returning the favor. I rather asked how she had sustained the injuries. Madeline claimed that she was driving to work with a truck, ran into her on her own vehicle, and it was the last thing that she remembered. I knew right then and there that she was a liar, because I had visited my house where she stayed some days before her call came in and the place was locked. From what I gathered, my stepmother was living her best life. Some of the neighbors even said that she was currently on a trip with her lover, and I saw her social media pictures from one of the neighbors who was on her friends list. I did not immediately bash Madeline, even though I knew that she was lying. I just asked where I fit into this whole picture. Madeline began to sell me some sob story. about how she needed to undergo some form of treatment which required a huge amount of money that she did not have. She said that since I had turned 18, I was the only one who had access to what my father had left for me, and she wanted me to pay for the treatment. As I noted, I did not plan on helping. She was insincere and did not deserve any form of help from me. Before giving my answer, I noted that I had a question and she gave me the go-ahead to ask look. Well, I asked her if she did not feel so ashamed to herself to ask a deadweight for money. Yep, that's right, I went there. Madeline said that all of that was in the past, but I was not buying it. See, I wasn't buying it at all. I asked her if she would have ever reached out to me, and this is a sincere question, if, well, she was not in a position where I could help her and she stayed quiet for a while. She then decided to play some emotional games using my late father, and she said that he would have desired peace between us more than anything else, and that's part of what she's trying to do. The more Madeline spoke, the more infuriated I became. I reminded her that my father had wanted when he was alive was just peace of mind, and she robbed him of that right the moment she moved in with us. I then went ahead to tell her that if her staying alive was hinged on me bringing the money that would be used for her treatment, then she could consider herself dead, because no dime of what I inherited from my father would get to her. It felt great asking her to, quote, go to hell before I cut the call. Madeline tried severely to reach me, but I refused to pick up. She then found a way to reach out to my grandparents, and I don't know what she told them, but they did their best to convince me to help my stepmom. I would do just as my grandparents have said, but before going ahead to give Madeline any form of assistance, I would need to confirm for myself if she was truly involved in an accident as she claimed. So right now, I'm on to that, looking into the whole thing about what all this fiasco is about. Well, I'll update you guys once I know what's up with that witch. Final update. I'm currently living in my house all by myself. After my grandparents had talked me into helping my stepmom, I decided to surprisingly pay her a visit. I did not give her any prior notice that I was going to show up at the house. I'd confirmed from the neighbors who noted that she was at home, and I sat down with my father's lawyer before going to see Madeline because I wanted to know the legal process involved in taking over everything that my father had passed on to me. Thankfully, nothing much was required since everything was already in my name. I showed up at the house and I could hear from the porch as my stepmother spoke to somebody over the phone. I listened as she told whoever it was that the reason why she endured every act of disrespect shown by me was that she wanted to use me as a cash cow and a maid. Well, I continued to listen as she laughed excitedly and just assured the person over the phone that it was only a matter of time before I gave in to the demands of my grandparents, who were already mounting pressure on me to make peace with her. Can you believe that? The reason Madeline wanted to, quote, make peace was because she was too broke to hire somebody to do her chores? I barged into the door in anger and she froze. I saw a few bruises all over her face, and I guess it was the result of the accident, but Madeline was fine beside that. Okay, I think there was a walking stick beside her, and I assumed she used it to walk. It didn't matter, though, because from what I had already heard, she had an ulterior motive, and it was not just going to allow me to sit back and let her make a fool of me. I told her. Her plan to turn me into a cash cow and her nurse had fallen ever before it stopped. She wanted to act like she had not said those words just a few seconds ago, but I wasn't buying it, guys. I told her, Madeline, to leave my house immediately, and I did not care if she walked or crawled out. I just wanted her out. Madeline still wanted to act like I was treating her unjustly, and I rushed at her in anger. The plan was to drag her out of the house, but to my surprise, Madeline stood up and overpowered me. Her legs were fine. The only real injury that she sustained from the accident was the bruises on her body, and I was the one who was thrown out of my house. Well, that was the last straw, because after that I just lost it. I went straight to my father's lawyer and I told him how my stepmother had beaten me up and thrown me out of my own home. He asked me to not worry, as we could build on Madeline's actions, and we involved the police almost immediately after, and we drove down to my house with them. Madeline was dragged out of my home in handcuffs and taken to the station where she was detained. Because my lawyer had me report a case of battery to the police, Madeline was demanded to pay a fine for her crimes, and I have obtained a restraining order. All of this unfolded in my own home I grew up in, and, this was about 4 months ago at this point. All of this because of Madeline's greed. But, well, I'm way past that now. Madeline has not bothered me since I got a restraining order against her, and the last I heard, she's been working as a babysitter for some people in the neighborhood to make ends meet. I guess that's where her greed for my inheritance led her. As for me, I'm back to staying in my house, the one that I grew up in, and though I'm living alone, my grandparents visit me often, and I'm happy to have it this way. It's better to live alone than to live with an evil person. I'll be going to college next month, and I could not be even more excited about it. Lastly, I would just like to thank you all for the support you've shown me. Well, as all of you have suggested, it's helped me a lot. Your suggestions and support, it means so much.
So, OP ends up having to get restraining orders against the stepmom. And I want to know if you guys were battling a stepmother like Madeline, who, by the way, did not seem to care about OP for the entirety of the story. And I'm not just talking about the ending of the story, I'm talking about when OP's father was alive. It just seemed like OP was there to neglect and be straight up neglected by the stepmother. So guys, I do want to know your thoughts, your opinions. I want to hear it all in the comment section down below, because this story, it had a lot of sad moments. I mean, OP lost both of the parents of the story, and then OP was the subject of borderline abuse for months, if not for years. Even though, at the end of the story, it looks like OP finally got a bit of justice, karma, revenge, whatever you want to call it. I refused to let my stepmom wear my mother's diamond necklace, and now she's threatening to kick me out of the house. I can't believe my father can't realize that this woman is good for nothing and all she cares about is his money. So I tell Grandma something very important.
My mom passed away when I was in high school, and until I finished high school, it was just my dad and me. Well, we were mourning until the end of my high school years, and my dad met Jenna. In the initial years, Jenna was very kind. She acted like a sister, helped me with my studies, and prepared meals. When my father proposed to Jenna after I graduated high school, I did not object because Jenna seemed nice at first, but she changed a lot after they got married. My mom was a wealthy woman, and my dad had a lucrative job. So when my mom passed away, the inheritance went to my father. I realized that Jenna married my dad for the money. My dad was unaware of Jenna's change, and Jenna convinced my father to hinder my university life. Instead, I stayed at home, and Jenna began treating me like a maid. She made me do all the housework, all the cooking, and everything while pretending that nothing happened when my dad came back home. I didn't speak up because my dad was happy, and after losing my mom, he deserved to be happy for the rest of his life. Jenna constantly criticized every single thing that I did, blaming me for being unsuccessful or untalented. After enduring for a few more years, I found a job and moved out from my parents' place to start living on my own. My dad was very sad when I left. He didn't want me to go, but I could not stay with Jenna any longer. I told my father that I could visit occasionally. My days were now spent commuting between work and home. I would visit my parents on holidays, and one holiday when I went to my parents' house, Jenna told me that I did not belong here, and that my father was better off without me. Although my dad occasionally helped me financially, Jenna claimed that the money wasn't rightfully mine and that I was no different from a beggar. My pride was shattered, and as soon as I returned home, I started preparing for university again. I wanted to both study and work, making my father proud and embarrassing Jenna. I became an architecture student at a reputable university. Right after enrolling, I surprised my father with a phone call. He was overjoyed and said he was proud of me. After losing my mom, Jenna had thought it would be difficult for me to continue my education, so my dad wanted me to stay home and be at peace. I knew my father had always been well-intentioned, but Jenna was a complete devil. Can you believe she tried to stop him from spending his own money on my education? I was having busy days at university, and my job was adding to the pressure. I didn't even have time to sleep. My dad told me he could support my education, but he was pressuring me not to go to work. During the Christmas week, I went to my parents' house, and while chatting at the dinner table, I was talking about my university and job. Jenna was visibly uncomfortable hearing about it. In fact, She was so provoked and uncomfortable that she started asking questions about my nightlife just to get my father going. She knew my dad was strict about such things, and I was aware of it. When I told my father that I was overwhelmed and I could not even sleep, he interrupted our conversation and said that I no longer needed to go to work and that he would cover all expenses. Jenna turned purple with jealousy, and I thanked my father and went to my room. After Christmas, I returned to school and stayed in my own place for a long time. I stopped visiting my parents because my goal was to finish school with honors before leaving. I graduated as the top student in my department and completed my internship. It was at a prestigious company where they even offered me a permanent position, Despite being older than the other students, no one seemed to mind. My parents came to my graduation, and Jenna was far from happy. My dad bought a nicer house closer to my workplace as a gift and beautifully decorated it. Jenna was constantly questioning my father's decisions, trying to just stop him. For the first time, my dad got angry with Jenna and sent her to a hotel, allowing us to, spend some quality time together. I took him to my workplace, introduced him to my bosses, and he proudly spoke about me. It was the happiest day of my life. Unfortunately, my father died a year after I began working from a heart attack. He was hospitalized but could not live due to the severity of the heart attack. After his death, I avoided going to the family house for a long time. Frankly, I didn't want to see Jenna. Consumed by the grief of losing my father, I focused solely on my work. Even participated in projects and attended all these endless meetings. Jenna, she didn't like me. Maybe never did, and I hoped that she loved my father, but I was wrong. The reason became apparent when my grandmother invited me back to the family home on the same day as Jenna's 50th birthday, which coincided with the anniversary of my dad's passing. So, I returned because of the invitation, intending to have a small commemoration for my dad's anniversary. However, Jenna, during her birthday celebration, told me not to act unnecessarily and dismissed the idea of a small remembrance of my dad's death. I was surprised by her words, but what shocked me even more was Jenna's desire to wear my mom's diamond necklace for her birthday. Well, due to my lack of trust in her, I refused this request, not wanting her to use my mom's inheritance for her own pleasure. This decision led me to being kicked out of the house. Jenna claimed to be the true owner of the house, stating that it was inherited after my dad's death and that she could kick me out. Even if I were to be evicted, I wasn't going to fall for this claim like a fool. First and foremost, I decided to meet with my grandmother. I told her everything about how Jenna has been behaving for years, the disrespect she showed during my dad's memorial, and how she kicked me out of the house. My grandmother, a figure feared by my dad and Jenna in the past time, was a person of unwavering moral values. The anger she felt towards what I shared prompted her to take immediate action. One day, she went to Jenna's house and revealed that she was the true owner of the home. In other words, according to the will, even if my dad passed away, my grandmother could rewrite it as long as she was still alive. Upon hearing this, Jenna remained silent. My grandmother also made her do the cleaning, humiliating her for being incompetent, but this was just the beginning. Determined to bring justice by turning my stepmom's life into hell, my grandmother was resolute. Frankly, I thought that these events would be a lesson for Jenna. In the end, my grandmother called me back to my stepmom's house. This way, I'm back in my house and got the ownership of the house too. However, my grandmother made a gesture of allowing my stepmom to live in the house, of course including the demand for monthly rent as part of this gesture. When things reached this point, I moved on with my life. At least Jenna woke up and now she's living as a tenant in my home. I wanted to kick her out right then and there, but my grandma stopped me. She didn't say why, but perhaps she had something planned for Jenna. Anyways, goodbye, guys. If anything exciting happens, I'll keep you posted. Updates. Number 1. I read the comments, and I do want to thank you guys for the good wishes. I'll always continue to stand on my own feet. However, I was very surprised by the negative comments I read even in such a situation. They seem to justify the actions of bad people. They don't talk about what Jenna did to me, and compared to what Jenna did to me, what I did to her is absolutely nothing. You're just malicious people, and my grandmother is a respected historian and has always been a woman of integrity. I was thinking of kicking Jenna out, but because my grandmother is a kind and thoughtful person, she suggested that Jenna stay at least by paying rent, getting a job, and reflecting on her mistakes. Giving Jenna a reward on top of what she did? How is that even a thought? Even though Jenna applied for jobs, nobody wanted to hire her because of the reason she left her previous job. Jenna would not even communicate with anyone at home. She wouldn't even look at us. She had an attitude as if we were deliberately making Jenna sad. I spoke to an old friend from high school and asked for a favor. She helped me by finding a job for Jenna because she needed to be paid. She had to pay rent, and just think about what she had done. I told Jenna that I found her a job and that she needs to pull herself together. Our relationship did not improve much, but at least we weren't as hurtful to each other as before. We even started having conversations about work during dinner. Jenna was slowly turning back into that sweet woman I first met. I didn't want to get my hopes up, but maybe Jenna and I could be friends. Jenna was confusing me by behaving like this, and a week later it was my birthday. Jenna had baked a cake for me, and we celebrated my birthday by chatting and remembering my dad. After celebrating my birthday, that comment came to my mind. Maybe Jenna loved my dad, but I didn't understand it. Thinking that we could talk, I brought alcohol home one day after work. Jenna and I started drinking and talking, and she was apologizing to me and expressing her regret. That night, I thought we could fix things between us. One evening when I returned home, I noticed that Jenna had angrily retreated to her room. I decided to talk and went inside. I asked Jenna, "Is everything okay?" But the answer I received surprised me. Jenna said that my grandmother constantly pressured her and looked down on her. I was shocked because my grandmother was usually fair and understanding. However, Jenna's insistence and anger made me start to think. Perhaps there was a disagreement between them, and something had happened that I did not notice. I wanted to trust Jenna. We had just started to mend things between us, and I could not be distrustful of her so soon, and I really felt torn and trapped, not knowing what decision to even make. Update number 2. Well, that night, Jenna's statements confused my mind, leading me into an emotional turmoil. Her claims about my grandmother's constant pressure had truly complicated the dynamics of our relationship. While on one hand, I was trying to reconcile with Jenna, on the other hand, I was attempting to understand my grandmother's perspective. The next day, I decided to explain the situation to my grandma. When I went to her and asked about the situation, she told me that Jenna was negligent in cleanliness and order, and did not adhere to those house rules. That's why she felt the need to pressure her. She also mentioned that Jenna avoided contributing to the household expenses. See, Jenna was at fault in the situation, but she was also genuinely upset. So, I told grandmother that continuously pressuring and lecturing Jenna would not solve the problem, and that even if Jenna was wrong, she should at least talk to her instead. My grandmother became angry at my words, stating that I was just trying to teach her a lesson, that I'd forgotten what Jenna had done. She was right, but I did not want to hold a grudge against Jenna, who was currently trying to become a better person. Well, a few days later, I decided to talk to Jenna. I needed to express my feelings and the uncertainty I was experiencing. Perhaps we could resolve our issues by openly discussing them. I went to her room, knocked on the door, and just said, "Jenna, let's talk." She was still standing there with an angry expression upon her face, and I began explaining my emotional state and expressed my desire to solve our problems as we, have talked about this before. Jenna starts to explain every single feeling that she was having, and I suggested, why don't we just try to resolve our issues over dinner one evening? Well, Jenna agreed. We gathered for dinner and started to talk. My grandmother listed the mistakes that Jenna had made, and Jenna explained that it was normal to have some slowness due to her age, and that she paid what she could from her job. Well, When my grandmother mentioned that Jenna always had excuses for living in this house, Jenna cried and went to her room. So I start to become very, very angry with my grandmother at this point, telling her that what she did was wrong and that she should not respond to Jenna's efforts like this. My grandmother went ahead to tell me after that, well, not trust Jenna too much and left. I did not understand why she would say something like that though. Jenna's changed a lot and I did not want my family to fall apart. I decided to support Jenna financially and help with household chores. However, my grandmother did not approve of what I was doing, saying that I was wrong to take on someone else's responsibilities. I was trying to justify my grandmother and build a bridge between Jenna and her. After months passed, my relationship with my grandmother deteriorated, while Jenna tried to get along with her. Jenna's good intentions secretly made me happy until one evening when I overheard Jenna talking on the phone. Initially, I thought I should not eavesdrop on her phone convo, but after hearing a couple of sentences, I realized that I needed to. Well, Jenna was telling a lawyer that she would soon convince my grandmother and reclaim the home. She was even considering suing me to take all the inheritance, and there was no love or genuine connection in the convo. It seemed like she wanted to possess the money, property, and assets of a stranger. The family relationship we've built over all this time turned out to be a deception. I was in shock after hearing what I did. Update number 3. That evening, I understood very clearly why my grandmother had said what she said. It was a game. I'd expected Jenna to be so malicious because of her, I had distanced myself from my grandma. I told her that we would become close with Jenna and become a family. How could she resort to such betrayal? It took some time for me to digest what I heard, and I was contemplating what I should do. Suddenly, I could not just stop helping. Jenna would figure out what I knew by then, and when I tried to talk to my grandmother, she was not talking to me as before. My mind's in turmoil, and I'm truly unhappy. I was very angry with Jenna, for now everything has appeared the same. I needed to mend things with Grandma, and I cooked the meal she loved and talked about topics she enjoyed. My grandmother must have realized something was wrong because, well, when we were alone at home, she asked me what happened, and I told her that she would not believe me even if I explained, as we were not as close as before. My grandmother assured me that she would be on my side no matter what. So, then I went ahead and just recounted Jenna's phone convo, detailing examples of her insincere, artificial behavior, such as Jenna not cooking despite being tired every day after work, but making my grandmother's favorite dishes and cleaning her bed, giving her massages. Jenna avoided discussing any contentious topics with Grandma and was always trying to win her favor. My grandmother found Jenna's actions abnormal, suspicious, and phony, and found it strange that Jenna, who never approached her before, was constantly being overly flattering over creating a rift between us. My grandma and I devised a plan to research Jenna's past, ensuring her disgrace in both her professional and social circles, and then evict her from the home. This way Jenna would have nowhere else to go, and her plans for personal gain would fail, and she would lose all respect in her surroundings, and, well, Jenna was at home, we pretended as if our relationship with Grandma was strained. But when Jenna left, we continued with our plan. To ensure the success of it, I had Jenna follow my savings, obtaining information that was not within my reach. In the past, she's taken someone else's inheritance before my father's time and kicked their children out of the house, but she had hidden it very, very well, making it difficult to find. Based on this information, we invited those children to join for our revenge plan. This revenge wasn't just mine now, it's theirs too. I'm sure my father married Jenna without knowing all this information. Additionally, we recorded Jenna's phone conversations, and in one of those conversations we learned that Jenna had a young lover. Yeah, she was using the money she received from me to spend on him. My grandmother was getting close to Jenna, and Jenna genuinely seemed very happy. This happiness would not last because the disappointment she made me feel would be reciprocated. We planned to reveal the information we gathered about Jenna on the anniversary of my father and Jenna's marriage. Jenna had committed legal crimes and would not escape the consequences, Act like she loves my father, spends my money when she has a younger lover, and tries to take everything away from me. Jenna, her end is near. Updates. Number 4. Hey guys, it's me again. Well, during the evening time, something happened. I was looking at Jenna and she was unaware of the preparations being made behind the scenes. I informed her that we would be organizing an event at home to celebrate the anniversary with my dad, a way to honor his memory. Initially hesitant, Jenna eventually agreed and my grandma and I started preparations. Following that, I instructed the children Jenna had previously evicted to send a letter to Jenna's boyfriend, asking them to attend the event. I also contacted Jenna's co-workers, informing them that Jenna was hosting a party and encouraging them to come. Additionally, we reported to the police about Jenna's illegal activities and previous court cases related to inheritance and property disputes from her previous marriage. Well, guess what? Simultaneously, we provided evidence in the form of documents held by the children she kicked out of their home. The police decided to assist the children in opening a case against Jenna for the inheritance dispute, and after our plan, there was no need to evict Jenna from the home. Spending some time in the slammer would help her come to her senses. The children who have been evicted and face constant challenges were happy to take some revenge on old Jenna. They were delighted to see justice served, and despite Jenna being of no benefit or anyone, her only contribution was making these children a part of my family. While all this was happening, Jenna continued with her preparation, unaware of what's going on. Dressing up, secretly making plans with her lawyer, Jenna, thinking we would be having an event with neighbors for the anniversary, was looking for a dress herself. I was decorating the house and preparing food. After all, this evening was particularly important for Jenna. After all, we had executed a flawless plan. My grandmother was assisting Jenna in choosing a dress, behaving as if she's become close to her, and I assumed Jenna was not enjoying it at all. As the guests were arriving, Jenna had not got here yet. It would truly be a big surprise for her. Jenna's young lover. He also stopped by, and I told him to sit in the front as a surprise was yet to come. The poor young man was happily waiting, unaware of Jenna's true nature. So, we chatted with the guest, drank our beverages, and everything seemed normal until Jenna arrived. My behavior appeared completely ordinary until Jenna got there. My grandmother said Jenna had got here, and Jenna had not expected such a crowd. I guess excitement and happiness were evident upon her face. But it did not last long. I immediately told her, right away off the rip, that I want to surprise her. When Jenna came over, she starts panicking upon seeing her young lover. I reassured her to stay calm. We have given everyone an envelope to open. In the envelope was descriptions and pictures of what Jenna has done. First, Jenna's lover stormed out, screaming at Jenna. Then I played the recording of their conversation, and people were shocked and disgusted, looking at Jenna with disdain. Finally, the police swooped in and arrested her, right there on the spot. Jenna was apologizing with tears, but this time I would not feel sorry. She had to pay the price for her actions, and when Jenna saw the children coming towards me, she looked at me in fear. I told her we would meet in court, and thus we got rid of Jenna. Final updates. Hey guys, this is it. As I'm tired of dealing with Jenna and she has got what she's deserved, Jenna went to prison for fraud. I can't press charges against her because she didn't do any fraud with me, but my testimony allowed her previous victims to get justice. I went with my grandmother and we went to go see the graves of my parents and had a heart-to-heart conversation. My grandmother said that my good intentions had brought the family together. She forgave me. She had never trusted Jenna and only tolerated her because of me. I made progress in my career and I was about to go abroad for a year of work. My grandmother also said that this would be better for me. I wanted to leave everything behind and start a new life. I learned that sometimes you should not give second or third chances to certain people, and that I just, needed to be as well-intentioned as my family. My grandmother has become old, very old, and before leaving the house I hired a caregiver for her. I was afraid something might happen to her. I had no one else besides her. Also, guys, I want to thank you, everybody out there, for reading my story, providing your advice, and all your support. Thank you, everybody. Goodbye.
So, it looks like Jenna's manipulation and just straight up toxic behavior catches up to her in the end, and she spends some hard time behind prison bars. I want to know what you guys would have done in this situation. It must have been hard to be OP, coping with the pressure of her stepmom and simply dealing with her father's death. I couldn't imagine being in that perspective, but I do want to hear from you guys. Would you have handled the situation differently? Would you have been more aggressive? What would you have done? Drop it down below in the comment section, guys. My fiance is a police officer, and my sister-in-law, she's a lawyer. Well, you might be wondering why the heck I'm asking you this. It's because Karen, my stepmom, physically assaulted me, and so did her little daughter, and there's something I need to tell you about this crazy dynamic. I'm pregnant when this all happened.
My father got married to another woman while my mother was still alive. I'm the only child of my parents, and we used to be one happy family till I was 8 years old. That's when my mother discovered that my father, whom she held in high regard, had cheated on her. My mother did not waste time deliberating her next move. She filed for divorce and walked out of the marriage, leaving me and my dad to focus on her business. Her reason was that she had been taking care of me in the house, which was why we had enough time to go, cheating outside. She said she felt that he would sit up and do better if she was out of the picture. My mother's theory somehow worked because I don't recall seeing my father bring women to the house ever since my mother left. Well, what would an 8-year-old know at that time anyways? I never knew what he did outside the house, and I was angry at both my parents. My anger towards my father was based on the fact that his secret lifestyle led to my mother moving out, while I was angry at my mom for letting my father's actions take her out of my life. Anyways, I tried being considerate as I grew up. I could not hold grudges forever because we're all humans, and who doesn't make mistakes amongst us? 10 years later, I turned 18 and was about to get into college. I knew going to college would affect my dad, as he would not have anyone around the house, so I began encouraging him to remarry. My father did not want to toe that line again, but after I made him see the need to, he began searching for a wife. It did not take long before he met my stepmother. My stepmom had never been married before, but she had a daughter called Alicia from her previous relationship, and yes, I initially raised an eyebrow when my dad introduced them to me, because I did not know it was the best idea for my dad to marry a lady with a grown-up daughter almost my age. My fears were dispelled as my stepmom and stepsister began making conscious effort to get close to me. They involved me in their day-to-day and even went as far as seeking my opinion during the marriage planning. We did not just make plans for the wedding, we made plans for life after the wedding, and the whole thing was super cool, to the point that I could not just wait for the wedding to take place and we started living as a family. I think the problem started a few weeks before the wedding when my mother, after 10 years of absence and silence, showed up at the house. My stepmom and Alicia were around that time because we were making some adjustments to the plans, and my dad was with us when there was a knock at the door. Alicia, who was already getting herself acquainted with the house, got up to attend to the individual at the door. She opened up the door, but all she did was turn back and stare at my father and me. We asked what the issue was, and she finally found the words to say that a woman who claimed to be my mother was at the door. I'm sure that she did not have any doubt in her mind about a woman at the door being my mother, because the resemblance was absolutely striking. Alicia gave away from my mom to walk in as she spoke with us, and my father immediately jumped to his feet upon seeing his ex-wife and asked her to leave. My mother noted that she was there because of me, but my dad would not give her the opportunity. He told her that I was doing well and did not need her in my life, and he promised to get a restraining order against her if she ever showed up at the house again. After my mother left, my father explained to my stepmom all that happened and assured her that my mother was not going to be an issue as we were both done with her. Well, I was not done with my mother. So, I met with my father after my stepmom and Alicia had left the house. I explained to him that even though he was no longer with my mom, there was nothing wrong with if they remained friends for my sake. I made him understand that they were both my parents and I still needed them in my life, and besides, if he never broke her trust by cheating on her, she would not have left in the first place. She was not even asking for his forgiveness because he had wronged her to start with, and she just wanted a chance to be present in my life again. My father reasoned with me and extended an invitation to my mother. My mother came to the house for lunch, and she and I had made both, she and my dad, bury the hatchet. Even though she had never remarried and was not considering it, she noted she was happy for my dad. My mother's business, at least, was booming, and you could say her departure 10 years ago had paid off. I knew there was still work to be done. I wanted to establish a cordial relationship between my dad, stepmom, and sister, and my mother. My life would revolve around these people, and I did not want to be playing sides. I just informed my stepmom and Alicia the next time they came to the house that I'd successfully made my parents put their differences aside to properly co-parent me. My stepmom and stepsister did not have any issues with it, and even commended me for forgiving and accepting my mother. I went ahead to tell them that I had arranged for my mother to come to the house for lunch by the weekend, and I wanted them to be there so they could properly be introduced. Alicia and her mother had no issue with that, and they claimed to look forward to it even. So my mother came for lunch and was properly introduced to my stepmom and Alicia. The whole thing went well, and my mother even promised to financially support my stepmom and my dad's wedding. It was nice seeing these things play out so well. We all looked forward to the wedding, and the wedding finally took place, and my stepmom and stepsister finally moved into the house with the father and me. So, the newest couple just went for a 1-week honeymoon at a resort. After they returned, I tried discussing with my stepmom about some of the post-wedding planning that we need to execute, but she noted it was being taken care of by Alicia. It felt odd because we were a team, or so I thought. I met with Alicia to get updated about the progress, but Alicia brushed me aside in such a subtle manner, so that I could tell both she and her mother were now trying to shut me out. There was no other explanation for their distant attitude, and I kept my observations to myself, and I did not let them make me relate to them differently. My mother came to the house one day to pick me up as we had an appointment that day. We were trying to catch up on lost times, and I ushered her in and went to finish my makeup while she sat at the parlor waiting for me. I was still in the process when I heard my stepmom's pitched voice from my room. I rushed to the parlor to see what was happening, only to meet my father sitting my mother out at the house, with my stepmom drumming support and calling my mom a homewrecker. I tried inquiring what happened, but neither my dad nor stepmom, or even Alicia, was willing to talk to me, so I ran after mom. My mother told me that my stepmom had walked up to her while she was waiting for me and told her to quit coming to the house. She asked her to keep away from her father, and if she desperately wanted to see me, she could do it outside the home. My mother wanted to know why her presence was suddenly not welcome anymore, and that's when my stepmom raised her voice and starts to create a scene. My father got there and demanded that my mom leaves the house after his wife had claimed my mom was acting hostile towards her. So, I was met with my stepmom the next day to see if we could have a reasonable discussion about what went down. I wanted to know if my mom had altered any, truth that she told me. My stepmom said the exact same thing that my mother had said, and even accused me of trying to help my mother invade the family to take over her place. She noted that she was aware of our, quote, scheme, the moment I convinced my father to establish a cordial relationship with my mom. But she decides to play the fool till marriage was done, and I knew then that both she and Alicia had been pretending to be okay with the arrangement all along. I was still in the process of figuring out what to say when my stepmom warned that I was never to invite my mother to the house, and her name was never to be mentioned. This was madness. I did not hide my displeasure, and I approached my father later in the day to express my unhappiness. He told me that he had remarried just as I advised him to, and it was his duty to prioritize his wife over any other person, including my mom. He noted that he did not want anything to jeopardize his recent marriage and the peace that he was enjoying, and so appealed to me to comply with what my stepmother said for peace to reign. Okay, well, I tried my best possible stuff to ensure that I did not clash with my stepmother or her daughter, and the fact that I got into college shortly after helped me a lot. I spent most of my time in school, and even when I was at home for holidays, I split my stay between father's home and mother's place. My father did not treat me badly, and even though my relationship with his wife was not great, I appreciated the fact that she gave me happiness, companionship, and of course comfort. I mean, it was a win-win situation. So, I got pregnant with my lover Edison a few weeks after I graduated from college. Edison was a cop, and yes, he lived a pretty average life. I did not know what to make of the matter. After contemplating getting rid of the child, I finally opened up to him about the situation of things, and he insisted we keep it. He knew there was every possibility of me facing ridicule for getting pregnant outside of wedlock and decided to get married to me at once. I told my mother about the situation, and though I expected her to be disappointed in me, she rather understood. She said the most important thing was the fact that Edison had acknowledged the pregnancy and was willing to get married to me. Oh, I brought to my mother to the house and stand beside as I broke the news to my father, stepmother, and daughter about the pregnancy. The moment my stepmother laid eyes on my mom, she began ordering her to leave. My father supported his wife till my mother told them that she would not show her face at their home if the situation did not warrant it. So my father was compelled to give my mother a listening ear, and the wife followed suit. My mother, however, was not the one who spoke. I tried so hard to count my words, as though I would still arrive at the part where I was pregnant. The moment I told my dad that I was a few weeks pregnant, my stepmom jumped up and began running her mouth. She began telling my father that her suspicion all the while that I spent most of my time in school was true, after all. I never knew that my stepmom had been telling my father all along that I was sleeping around, and my mother, who probably knew, was in full support of my actions. She said that the fact I've gotten pregnant just a few weeks after my graduation meant I'd known the person before I graduated. In fact, well, she was right. My father was shocked and just looked at me. My mother asked his wife to shut up till they heard me out. So she went on to tell my dad that my lover was willing to take full responsibility and had decided to get married to me after the child was born. He would, however, formally get engaged to me before then, and my stepmom immediately jumped right in and starts telling my dad that my mother would support me, and she was sure my mother was the one enforcing the marriage thing to cover my shame. Even if that was the case, is it a bad thing for a mother to cover the shame of her child? If it was her daughter in my shoes, would she let her face the situation by herself? My mother, who was already irritated, warned my father's wife to keep quiet or she was going to get the beating of her life. My father intervened. He noted that while he was not in support of a lady getting pregnant outside of wedlock, I was a full-grown woman and I could simply take responsibility for my actions. His verdict was that since my lover was willing to get married, I was to bring him home. His coming to the house was not to check if he was a suitable match, it was just a formality to know the person who has gotten his daughter pregnant. I officially brought Edison to my family, and my father gave his blessing while my stepmother looked for any reason to be not available that day. My mother called me later on to her house and asked if I loved Edison and would get married to him without the pregnancy in the picture, and I told her yes. She decided she was going to support me to the fullest. Edison was planning a small engagement party for me, but my mother insisted she did the planning. The party was nice, and my stepmother and Alicia were not there, but it didn't matter. The surprising part of the party was when Edison pulled out a ring and placed it on my finger. It was surprising because the ring was a diamond ring, and I was wowed and had questions because Edison was a police officer whose paycheck could not afford this. I felt he probably hired it and would replace it later with one of the lesser values, but Edison noted that it was mine to keep. So, I inquired later on, and he told me it was given to him by my mom. I approached my mother and she said it was gifted to her by a man whom she, should have gotten married 2 years ago if death had not snatched him. I made sure to flaunt my diamond ring before my stepmother and her daughter, and my dad spoke with me about Edison's source of wealth, and I knew it's because of the diamond ring. I told him how the ring had come about, and Edison and I were making plans for a moderate wedding before the pregnancy got its advanced stages, but he met with me yesterday to ask that we put the whole marriage on pause. I could not tell why he was acting the way he did, and he didn't want to say. He only said we canceled the wedding plan till the child was born and we could decide if we truly wanted to get married after that. I tried making him understand that I loved him regardless of the baby, but he claimed I was just saying so because I was pregnant. It just seemed odd. I could tell he had heard something from someone which pushed him to make the decision he just made. I cried at my mother's house yesterday as so many thoughts were just going through my mind. My stepmom had mockingly said one time that, quote, these poorly raised boys would get girls pregnant with the promise of marriage and hope of a family, but they would just jolt. Because all they needed was a woman who would give them children without them being fully committed. I was scared that my stepmom's words were going to be reality in my life. I was. My mother reached out to Edison and he maintained his absolute stand. For some reason which I cannot figure, my stepmom was trying to call me since yesterday and I don't know why. I don't know how I'll be able to look my father in the face and tell him that the marriage would wait till after the child was born. I knew my stepmom and her daughter would take a great delight in me seeming fortune. Well, I would go back home soon because they're bound to discover the truth sooner or later. Update number 1. Hey guys, I broke the news to the family, and you can't trust my stepmom and her daughter to be the heartless folks that they are. I got home and I wanted to take a pause before telling my dad about it, but my stepmom, of all people, asked about the progress of the marriage plans. This is someone who refused to be present during Edison's introduction to the family and my engagement party, and I went on to inform them that no marriage would be taking place anymore till my child was born. My father asked the reasoning. I told him my fiancé had thought it's best that we wait. My stepmom immediately laughs and said that Edison was now trying to avoid a lifetime commitment, as he knew it would be a bad idea with me. She then said that I was now drifting to the next phase of my life, becoming a single mother while living in my father's house. She and her daughter busted out laughing. I ran to my room crying, while my father rebuked the both of them. My father would later try comforting me, but the words of my stepmother rang strong in my clear ears. I locked myself up for days, as though I was going through was not enough. My stepmom called for a family meeting 2 months later, and she surprisingly invited my mother. We were all seated in anticipation of what could make my stepmom throw her doors open to my mom. My stepmom began her speech by saying that it seemed we would be having a marriage celebration after I dashed their hopes in pieces. I ignored the statement, and my mother's anger was already brewing. My father asked her to, make her words plain. Alicia was the only one who spoke up by saying that a responsible man who has not yet slept with her was asking for her hand in marriage. Her mother cut in by saying that Alicia could not get pregnant out of wedlock as she had trained her very well. Tears were streaming down my face, and my mother, who could not stand it, immediately asked my dad to put a leash on his wife and stepdaughter, otherwise all hell was going to break loose. My mother's warning did not stop my stepmom from running her mouth. My stepmom told my dad to throw me out of the house to go live with my father of the child so I don't bring embarrassment upon him. My father immediately rebuked them, and the rebuke was timely because my mother was almost launching at them. The meeting ended in a ruckus with my mother asking me to come live with her, and I would be going to stay at her place for the next 3 days till I go to bed. At least Alicia would have gotten married and moved to her husband's house by then. Update number 2. I'm making this update from the hospital, where the doctors have been fighting to save my life and that of my unborn baby. I was sent here by my stepmom and her daughter Alicia yesterday. It happened just yesterday while I was putting my things together and getting ready to stay with my mother when Alicia walked into the room. She politely greeted me, and I wondered what she was up to because we were not on talking terms the last time I checked. Well, she did not come for war, so I extended an arm of peace by politely responding to her greeting. Alicia began talking about how she did not want it to seem like they were chasing me out of my father's house. I knew her statement was just mere talk. She and her mother were happy that I was moving out, and her mother did not hide the fact. I was eager to see where all this talk would go to lead, and Alicia then disclosed her reason for coming. She said she wants to borrow my diamond ring to take some photos and upload them on her social media post, and I did not have any problem with her using my diamond ring to chase a bit of clout over the internet. But hey, her next comments put me off. I'd agreed to give her the ring, and in fact I'd already handed it over to her when she said that I could as well forgo it since my marriage to Edison was likely not going to hold up, even after our child must have been delivered. I demanded my ring back right then and there. She refused to give it to me, and I asked why I had picked a fence because she had pointed out something true. I told her that even if I were not going to get married to Edison, I would not give her my diamond ring. A struggle ensued between the both of us, and Alicia found herself on the floor within seconds, screaming aloud, and yes, her mother came rushing in. The moment Alicia saw her mom, she accused me of beating her up because she had asked to use my ring for pictures. My stepmom accused me of wanting to kill her only child because of a ring that was not going to be used by me after I've even given birth. The fact that she spoke with such certainty about my future was vexing. I told my stepmom that it was my diamond ring after all, and if her daughter so needed one, she could ask her fiancé, who, quote, was a responsible man that had not yet slept with her, to get her a diamond ring. My stepmom gave me a dirty slap, and a fight ensued. Alicia joined forces with her mom, and they seriously beat me up, and Alicia left with the diamond ring. They left me on the floor in my room, and there was no help as father wasn't around. Alicia took pictures with my ring, uploaded them to her social media handles, came back and threw it on me while I was still in pain on the floor. I managed to gather myself up after a while, took a cab, and headed to the hospital where I literally passed out. I've been at the hospital since yesterday, and I just called my mom to tell her where I am. Guys, she's on her way to come see me. Update number 3. My mother's currently housing my father in a surprising turn of events. Are you ready for this? After my mother got the hospital to see me, she was horrified as I explained to her what happened. She was raging about she was going to do certain things to my stepmom and her daughter when I noticed I was bleeding. I called her attention to it and she rushed off to call the doctors. I was subjected to a series of testing, and the results was that I had lost my baby. I was inconsolable. My mother, in a fit of rage, called my father and asked him to come down to the hospital as it was an emergency. My father gets to the hospital and my mother transferred the aggression, which she had built up from my stepmom and Alicia, to my dad. She told him that his wife and stepdaughter had successfully beaten my unborn child to death and endangered my life in the process. My father was shocked at the story that he heard. In his defense, he said he never knew I was in the hospital for the past few days. According to him, he had come back home and asked about me, but Alicia and her mom told him that I'd probably gone to my mom's place, and I said I would. There was no mention of a fight at all. So my father immediately left the hospital in a fit of rage. My mom and I suspected he was going to make his wife and stepdaughter feel his wrath, but he promised to check up on me before I was dismissed from the hospital. I get discharged the next day, and my mother and I were leaving for her house when my father finally showed up. He had some scratch marks all over his face. My mother did not care about his predicament, but I was concerned, so hey, I inquired about what happened. My father noted that he had gotten to the house and queried his wife and stepdaughter on why they would physically gang up against me. Their response did not help matters, and my father demanded they leave his house. Alicia and her mother absolutely refused. My stepmom and Alicia now violently ganged up against him and called the cops after they had inflicted some marks on him. The cops came and duo changed the narrative to be that my father attempted to assault them and they had to defend themselves. My father was detained but let out on bail. He was now denied access to his own house, and my stepmother had promised to electronically send him the divorce papers within a week. Well, I had to plead with my mother to let my father temporarily stay with us till he got a place. Update number 4. Alicia and her mom have just been detained. Well, denied bail at the police station where they were being detained. I tried reaching out to Edison all the while I was at the hospital, but it was not possible. It was the day we left to go to my mother's place that he came down to the house and told us he had been down with a fever. He said some of his colleagues called to his attention that a man, matching my father's description, was initially detained, and I broke the news of the fight and the miscarriage, and Edison's reaction was the same as everybody who had a working conscience and heard the wickedness of my step-siblings. Edison opened up to us and said the reason he had put the marriage plan on hold was because my stepsister Alicia had visited him with the claim that I was only getting married to him because of the pregnancy. My father explained his situation, and Edison was overwhelmed by the whole thing, and he wanted to storm my father's house and arrest both of them. But my mother advised that we did not make any rational decisions because it was their word against ours. Edison got in touch with his sister, who's a lawyer. After listening to us, she said I could sue Alicia, her mom, for battery and temporary seizure of my diamond ring. It would not be Alicia's word against mine because the images which she posted on social media on the day of the attack, it showed that she had my ring on her finger, and even if she went ahead to claim that I willingly gave her the ring, the hospital recordings would show that I was hospitaled on that very day with bruises which resulted from physical assault. Edison's sister had shown us the path to victory, so we moved to the next plan, storming my father's house to get them arrested. My father, mother, and I were the first to arrive at the house, but Alicia and her mom refused to open up. They were busy running their mouths when the cops led by my fiancé drove in and broke down the door. Alicia and her mom were told I sued them for battery and theft they claimed the police were misinformed by me. Well, Edison's sister was with us, and she noted that there was a sample evidence to put them behind bars for a very, very long time. My stepmom insisted on her innocence because she felt it was their words against mine, but when the facts were made plain to them to the station, they immediately started pleading for mercy. My would-be sister-in-law has advised that I let my father use their plea to his advantage, and that's what we did. Alicia and her mom are being offered a reduced sentence if my stepmom agrees to a divorce without any form of settlement. Edison and I have started, the wedding plan again. Even though we lost the child, things are equally going great for my parents too, as I suspect that they're going beyond the bounds of peace to establish some kind of intimate relationship.
The stepmom divorcing OP's dad has to be the icing on top of the cake. This story was very twisted, it had a lot of toxicity, a huge family drama dynamic, but the craziest part about today's story, in my opinion, is when I was reading the comment section from the original post, all the updates. Guys, it seems like this sort of story actually happens a lot in the real world. There was people saying, yeah, I've been through the same thing with my stepmom, my stepfather, my sister-in-law, even step-siblings, and I just couldn't help but think, how much does this really happen? If you guys have ever experienced anything like today's story, just drop it down in the comment section. If you want to share it, I would love to read your experiences and just chit-chat in the comment section. My name's Mr. Reddito. Thank you once again for joining me. Hit that subscribe button for daily drama stories. And just remember one thing, please. It's cool to be kind. I'll see you tomorrow.